That's the new math they're teaching.
Yeah.
When you divide, you get a different number. Oh, I'll just show you. So all these were fives on this, he said.
That's why I invented Excel.
I always use spreadsheets.
I love it.
Jeff, did you just put one person in a different
I
place?
have to do my
That's what
tax
I'm taking a
form
look
every
at
year.
here.
I put a
Just the
spreadsheet
performance
for my
objectives.
CPA. It's like, thank you, I don't have to do.
All right.
I just called her. This is it. If I don't see him, drag him down.
I'll get fixed.
Morning, sir. How are you?
Good. Very good.
He told me he was coming this morning. I said, really, why? Because I'm just concerned. Yeah. Okay, here we go. Good morning. It is 9 o'clock. I would like to call to order the October 20th, 2021 City Council meeting. Let the record reflect that all city council members and city officials are present or in the building. If you would please stand and join me for the invocation, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance.
Shall we pray? Heavenly Father, we know you are our Father because we are your children. Father, when we pray what comes out of our heart, not what comes out of our mouth, to be important. We thank you, Lord, for what you do for us each and every day. As this is Nancy and John's last day working with the City Council, we thank you for the years of service they have provided for this city. Lord, we pray for the new members coming on in November. We also thank you for what you do in our lives each and every day. We pray for the council meeting today. We pray that each decision that's made be pleasing to you and the people of Punta Gorda. We thank you for what you do in our lives. And all God's people said, amen.
We need to get on this. The next step is, which I've been working on the legislative level, is we need to address the FDEP NPDES permit, renewal and modification. It's imperative we get these laws, the MCLs lowered, not increased. We need to make it stricter for them to discharge and pollute our precious Peace River. Mosaic has Mosaic Riverview all the way down to Charlotte County. We're discharging here. In between Tampa Bay Riverview and Charlotte, we have the Alafaya, the Manatee, the Myakka, the Peace River, watersheds that provide life to many people and animals. This is very, thank you, Council. Yes. Thank you, John.
Okay. Is there anyone else that would like to address the council? So much for the timer working. Okay.
Hi, my name is Jeff Lustig. I came on the steps of City Hall today to protest the Punta Gorda sign ordinance. First, I need to know from the council and the city attorney what words you have deemed to be obscene and indecent. I don't want to break the law, and I don't want to be fined $5,000 for causing irreparable harm to this community. I came on the steps of City Hall to protest the Punta Gorda sign ordinance. We already have spent $11,000 defending this ordinance, so now I see why the fines are so excessive. The city attorney claims that the executive committee member of the Republican Party of Charlotte County, in his dissent to the sign ordinance, used the F word instead of saying the actual word, proving that he knows the word has obscene connotations. I say this is disingenuous, because if he had said the F word, he would have been thrown out of the meeting because of the rules of conduct. I came on the steps of City Hall, a traditional public forum, to protest. Are there any 16-year-olds in the audience? Fortunately, you're not 16, I hope. I don't seem to see any of them. I have to make sure that I'm not damaging the hearts and minds, because the sole purpose of this ordinance was to protect 16-year-olds from indecent speech. One of the elements to be arrested for this sign ordinance is that a 16-year-old has to see the sign. I have checked this public space and have found it to be free of 16-year-olds. Can I display my F. Biden or F. Trump sign without fear of arrest? Oops, oh, that's right here, sorry. Now you're going to say that this meeting is being broadcast on the internet. It can be shown to 16-year-olds who have access to the internet. Are we going to fine parents for allowing their 16-year-olds to view this? Or am I going to be fined because a random person puts up my sign on the internet? Are we going to start banning books that have indecent material because a 16-year-old may have access to it? I came on the steps of the City Hall to a traditional public forum to lend my support to the Republican Committee of Charlotte County to help repeal this unconstitutional ordinance. Look, I just don't, time, place, and manner. There's no place that you can show your sign that a 16-year-old doesn't have access to. And are we really going to go down the rabbit hole of limiting free speech and signage and political debate? I just feel sad that we're discussing things that have already sort of been settled and causing such attention to this community for such a needless kind of waste of time and money and effort. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to address council?
Good morning, Council. My name is Sherman Johnson. I've been a resident of Punta Gorda since 2009. I'm here to introduce myself to you and let you know that I've submitted my application and nomination form to serve on the Planning Commission for the vacancy of the unexpired term, and I also plan to submit my application for the upcoming term in the next year. Thank you very much. My resume and application are on file. I've turned them in to Sarah. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your offer to serve. Is there anyone else that would like to address the council on any matter? Okay, seeing none. If there is anyone else in the audience that would like to introduce themselves as a candidate for a board or committee nomination, please come forward and state your name for the record, and you have 3 minutes. Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to the proclamation part of the meeting. Sometimes in the community, we have great things that happen to great people and great businesses, and we like to acknowledge them. And today we have two wonderful presentations. And I would like to call forward Matt Nemec and Frank Sarasoli from the Wyvern Hotel. Recently, Councilmember Prefke and I attended a reception at the Wyvern Hotel, and they were awarded a great award from Ascend Hotel Collection, which is the Ascending Community Service Award. And this is for all of their great efforts and philanthropy in the community. And I thought it was prudent to acknowledge them before the city council and the residents of the city to say thank you for all that you do in our community. And thank you for being a great asset to Punta Gorda. We're very happy that you're here. And we really appreciate you doing all that you do to acknowledge the efforts of some of our nonprofits in the community. They presented a check to the Backpack Kids for $2,000 and one to the Military Heritage Museum and the Visual Arts Center for $500 each at that reception. And so we thank you very much, and I have a certificate of appreciation for you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. If you'd like to make a
It's quite an award, and it's, we don't really think on an international scale so much in Punta Gorda. We're all kind of humble and kind of take care of ourselves and each other and that sort of thing. But this is an award that is from 7,100 hotels in 41 different countries. And so when it gets brought onto us at this, what I think is a smaller scale, internationally speaking, I think it's just, I have a little fun with it. And I think of maybe somebody in, let's just say, Singapore. And they work at the hotel that they work at, and in the morning they're looking at it and they say, Punta Gorda, Florida just won this award. And guy looks at his workmate or something and says, where's Punta Gorda? And he goes, Google it. So, just for that split second, somebody from some other place is Googling where the heck Punta Gorda is, and that's us. The community award was given to us at the Wyvern, but it's a community award, so it's for all of us. And this is what it's all about. So thank you for giving us just a couple minutes, and thank you for the presentation. That's great.
Thank you very much. We appreciate you being here.
Yeah, thanks. Thank you.
And for the next presentation, I'm going to sneak around the outside of the chamber and come in the other door because I want to do this from the ground up.
She can't get by me.
Right. I really can't get by you.
There's no easy way to do that from the dais. So, we have a very special young lady with us today who I was privileged to meet several months ago. She has been a great advocate and ambassador for the city of Punta Gorda, and she just represented the city of Punta Gorda in the Miss Punta Gorda Teen Pageant, and then she went to the Miss Florida Teen Pageant and participated in August up in Orlando at the pageant and represented our beautiful city. And I just have a brief bio I want to read about her. She's currently Miss Punta Gorda Teen USA and a senior at Charlotte High School. She ranks in the top 1% of her graduating class and plans to go to college to become an orthodontist. Jade Hernandez became Miss Punta Gorda Teen USA because of her academic excellence and her involvement both inside and outside of school. She's a member of National Honor Society, International Thespian Society, and the president of her choir board and vice president of Tarpon Leadership Academy. Jade wanted to use her title to promote leadership within the youth and has done just that by partnering with Brenda Brown and working with the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society. Jade led a 12-member multi-generational team and was able to raise over $8,000 for blood cancer research in just 7 weeks earlier this year during March. Jade hopes to continue working within her community as she goes off to college and with other organizations to help further spread awareness for causes. And we have the very first ever, since I've been the mayor, Mayor's Ambassador Award for you. Take a picture with their phone.
Absolutely.
Let's do it up in front of the dais.
We also have the video we can pull off of. Yes. Don't accidentally wipe it out. Second. Thank you.
Okay. All right, next on our agenda is, we have two proclamations, and the first one is National Long-Term Care Residents' Rights Month. And Councilmember Prefke will be reading that.
My pleasure. Proclamation, City of Punta Gorda, Florida. Whereas there are more than 1.3 million individuals living in 15,600 nursing homes and over 800,000 individuals living in 28,900 assisted living / residential care facilities in the United States. And whereas the Federal Nursing Home Reform Act of 1987 guarantees residents their individual rights in order to promote and maintain their dignity and autonomy. And whereas all residents should be aware of their rights so they may be empowered to live with dignity and self-determination. And whereas we wish to honor and celebrate these citizens, to recognize their rich individuality, and to reaffirm their right to vote and participate politically, including the right to have a say in their care. And whereas individuals and groups across the country will be celebrating Residents' Rights Month with the theme, Reclaiming My Rights, My Home, My Life, to highlight the need for residents' rights to be recognized, recovered, and reasserted. The theme emphasizes the recognition of long-term care facilities as the residents' home and the importance of residents reclaiming their own lives. Now, therefore, the City Council of the City of Punta Gorda, Florida, does hereby proclaim the month of October 2021 as National Long-Term Care Residents' Rights Month in the City of Punta Gorda and encourages all citizens to join in the city and these important observances. Passed and duly adopted this 20th day of October 2021, City of Punta Gorda, Florida, signed Lynn R. Matthews, Mayor. And I'm just reading this only, there was no one to actually accept this. So, anyway.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, next we have a proclamation for Florida City Government Week, and Councilmember Cummings is going to read this.
Good morning. Whereas city government is the government closest to the most citizens and the one with the most direct daily impact upon residents, and whereas municipal government provides services and programs that enhance the quality of life for residents, making the city their home. And whereas city government is administered for and by its citizens and is dependent upon public commitment to and understanding its many responsibilities. And whereas city government officials and employees share the responsibility to pass along the understanding of public services and their benefits. And whereas Florida City Government Week offers an important opportunity for elected officials and city staff to spread the word to all citizens so that they can shape and influence this branch of government. And whereas Florida League of Cities and its member cities have joined together to teach citizens about municipal government through a variety of activities, now therefore the City Council of City of Punta Gorda does hereby proclaim this week, October 18th through 22nd, 2021 is Florida City Government Week, and encourages all citizens, city government officials, and employees to participate in events that recognize and celebrates Florida City Government Week. Passed and duly adopted in regular session, the 20th day of October, signed by Mayor Lynn Matthews and our city manager, Greg Murray, receiving.
Does that mean I get to say something?
Yes.
Yes, you do. Yes, you do.
Awesome.
need a
Please go to the
microphone.
podium. You have to speak into the microphone like everybody else.
Well, certainly,
Please state your name for the record.
city manager. Certainly, when we look at City Government Week, it is important to all of us. We certainly appreciate not only our elected officials, but the staff that helps make our city such a great place, and the input that we have from our citizens and our volunteer committees that help make the city of Punta Gorda appropriately with this proclamation, the best city government anywhere. So we appreciate that people recognize city government in general and the amount of work that goes into actually managing and being the elected officials that actually set the stage for what we can do as government itself. So thank you for the proclamation, and we'll put this somewhere nice.
Thank you. And thank you to the city clerk for putting that on the agenda at the last minute. We seem to have gotten a plethora of proclamation requests this week. I was getting them fast and furious, poor Karen. Okay, next on the agenda, we have a resolution. However, this is going to be a quasi-judicial resolution, and city clerk will need to swear in anyone that wishes to give testimony on this.
Thank you. Anyone intending to offer testimony in today's proceedings, please stand and raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth in today's proceedings?
I do.
Thank you. When you come to the podium to speak, please state your name and indicate you've been sworn. Thank you.
And this is a resolution which I'll read by title only. A resolution of the City Council of the City of Punta Gorda, Florida, approving the final plat to subdivide a parcel of land containing 39,245.58 plus or minus square feet, or .90 plus or minus acres, into 5 single-family residential lots and 1 commercial lot, in order to create a subdivision to be called Jamaica Way subdivision for the property at 1700 Jamaica Way, Punta Gorda, Florida, more particularly described on Exhibit A attached to this resolution, authorizing the mayor and city clerk to execute the plat, authorizing the city clerk to forward this resolution and the original final plat to the circuit court clerk for recording at the applicant's expense and providing an effective date. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning. Lisa Hannon, zoning official, and I have been sworn. I'd like to enter our staff report into the record in its entirety by reference. This is a subdivision request for 1700 Jamaica Way. Again, as it states in the resolution, we're going from one larger lot to 5 single-family lots and 1 commercial lot. It is considered a minor subdivision. This originally housed a 12-unit condominium development, which was damaged by Hurricane Charlie and subsequently demolished in 2005. So the property, may be familiar with the property. In 2018, we received a request or a petition to rezone from general multifamily 15 units per acre to neighborhood center. That was approved. So under the neighborhood center development standards, for residential, it will follow the neighborhood residential development standards. Has to have a minimum 3,500 square foot minimum lot area, but the proposed lots are between 5,260 up to 5,499 square feet for each of the 5 lots. Neighborhood center development standards, there's no minimum lot area required. However, what is proposed is 12,025 square feet for the commercial portion. So it does not create any non-conformities. It is served by a public street, Jamaica Way. Utilities are available. Utilities has recommended that service be installed prior to final plat approval. However, a utility plan has been submitted and approved by the Utilities Department. It's consistent with the comprehensive plan, future land use policies 1.1.11.1 and 1.1.15.1, objective 1.1.15, coastal management, recreation and open space, policy 5.1.2.2, public school facilities, policies 8.1.2.3, 8.1.2.6, and intergovernmental coordination 9.1.1. So a summary again is it's just a minor request for a subdivision. It meets the requirements of Chapter 28 Punta Gorda Code of Ordinances and Comprehensive Plan 2040 and the Florida Statute 177.01. Recommendations are that the utilities are recommending that the service lines be installed prior to final plat approval. However, the utility plans have been submitted and approved. The applicant is here and he can speak as to when the construction can take place. But Urban Design Division, we do recommend approval of the final plat.
Thank you. Any questions for staff? I do have one quick question, and this has been a few years, and I know that those of us who were on council back in 2018, I think we all met with Mr. Farhat to discuss this project when it was first being proposed. But to refresh my memory, with terms of the commercial portion of the parcel, we talked about when it's developed that the entrance driveway will be on the back side of it, furthest away from Marion Avenue. Is that correct?
We don't have development plans, and when it was, when the rezoning was approved, there was no site plan actually submitted. So it would have to meet our development standards, which we have a distance from an intersection for any type of commercial driveway. So it couldn't be right on the intersection. I believe it's 40 feet away from the intersecting right-of-way that it would have to be approved.
So it's not going to be on Marion? That was a question that I got.
That's not my understanding. But the applicant is here, the property owner is here if you would like to ask that question.
Okay. Yeah, I'd like to get that question answered. Somebody asked me that. And also the intensity of the commercial building when it's built, as far as traffic flow and so forth. That was something that somebody asked me yesterday. Good morning.
Good morning. Anthony Farhat, I've been sworn in. So we don't have the development plans for the commercial. I would assume it would be off Jamaica Way. We have done some preliminary plans, so it did make sense to have the parking lot buffer in between the residential units and the commercial building itself, as opposed to having the building pinned together. So I think both for the residential aspect and the commercial aspect, it's more appealing to both parties in that scenario to have the parking lot buffer, and the parking lot, of course, would be connected to the easement or egress.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Mayor, if I might.
Yes.
So it's been a while since we've actually considered a plat approval, and I wanted to kind of talk a little bit about the difference between a quasi-judicial decision and a legislative decision. Actually, earlier this week, I was asked to kind of identify what type of proceeding is necessary for the vacation of a street. And after refreshing my recollection on the case law as it relates to that, and particularly with respect to our ordinance clearly states that it's within the discretion of the city council, and case law suggests that it is a legislative action. So it's at your whim without any specific criteria as to how you would exercise your decision-making as it relates to the vacation of a street. A plat, however, and the case law is clear on this, in order to get a plat approved, there is both statutory and city criteria that has to be satisfied. Once you've satisfied that criteria, there is no further discretion on the part of the city council, absent other provisions in the code, such as the ability to approve with conditions. The burden would have to shift to us to explain why it doesn't meet the criteria. And as I understand it, the applicant has met and satisfied the criteria. There is no criteria in our ordinance or in the statute as it relates to the timing of the installation of utility lines. Other jurisdictions typically have in their ordinance a requirement that as part of the application, the applicant submit a bond or letter of credit to ensure that the utilities and roads, the infrastructure is in place before the lots are sold. We don't have anything like that, and to impose something like that on the applicant as requested by the Utilities Department would exceed the jurisdiction of the council in this quasi-judicial proceeding as it relates to final plat approval. So I just wanted to make that clear on the record.
And I appreciate that. I can speak to the utilities, actually. So we're those of you that have been on this journey with me since the beginning. I mean, we are as anxious as anybody is to get this going and sell these properties. So we have engaged utility contractor DM Construction, who's a local utility contractor, We have offered to pay an expediting fee, which we agreed to. That proposal came through. This all kind of came together last minute on the utilities comments. I think it was in September. And they have assured us that they can start in 45 days. That being said, in this environment, I would probably put a little bit of a buffer time in there and say maybe 60 or 90 days is a little bit more realistic. But we are obviously motivated to get that done right away, too.
Great. Okay, do we need to do public hearing on this then?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Okay, this is a public hearing. If there's anyone in the audience that would like to speak on this issue, please come to the podium, state your name for the record, and you have 3 minutes. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to address council on this matter? Last call. Anyone wishing to speak to city council on this issue?
Move to close public hearing.
Second. We have a motion and a second to close the public hearing. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
Move approval of the resolution to approve the final plat.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the resolution for the final plat for the parcel on Jamaica Way. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. We look forward to seeing the project. As I recall, it's going to be really pretty.
Yes.
Thank you. Okay. Next, we have the consent agenda. Does anyone want to pull anything from the consent agenda?
Move approval of the consent agenda.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Okay, we're moving on to the regular agenda. The first item is the northbound Tamiami Trail US 41 Vision Study. And we have Mr. OJ. Good morning.
Good morning. For the record, Mitchell Austin, Urban Design Department. I just wanted to say briefly that that city staff and the FDOT project team have been working diligently on this project. It's been a very cooperative and I think very productive relationship, and I want to thank council for their efforts in the process going through this planning study. Thank you.
Thank you.
Morning. For the record, I'm Richard Ojevolk, or everybody just calls me OJ, and I'm the project development manager over at FDOT. And I want to echo in on Mitchell's statements that when I first came out here, I told you all this was kind of a new way of us for trying to do business, trying to make sure that we incorporate as much of the locals' requests and desires in projects and try to accelerate them and bring them to production faster. And I want to thank y'all and everybody that was involved. We did extensive public involvement, and I know that I probably sent emails and possibly even mildly harassed y'all guys for comments and everything like that, but I appreciate y'all's efforts in doing this, and I think we've come up with at least a good concept to move forward into design. I'm here today to request concurrence on this to move it to design after I get through the presentation, but I do want to also predicate that with the fact that as it goes through the design process, we will still be in coordination, and any changes or things that come up as that design progresses, we can hopefully address those and make sure we incorporate them in. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and start the presentation here. Again, just a quick overview. About 4 years ago, this began as a resurfacing project. Our planning group contacted the city for additional requests or requirements that might go in here. It resulted in a resolution for us to continue to study and to look at incorporating positive elements of the comprehensive plan into the work that FDOT was doing. This current effort has had extensive stakeholder outreach, public involvement, a lot of one-on-one with just councils, and then a lot of one-on-one meetings with various stakeholders throughout the area. The housing coalitions, the chambers, local groups, churches, neighborhood groups, and a whole, probably about 20-plus individual private meetings on top of the private meetings we have with council in order to try to gauge people's requests. It also included an online survey that was fairly well received. So today, the concept summary. through a series of, presentations I've made, working with the staff, discussing with all the stakeholders we had, we are trying to maintain a bicycle path. A roundabout was chosen for Carmelita in order to increase the access and allow for left turns from Carmelita to go southbound on 41, allow for southbound US 41 traffic to more safely make turns. And because of the type of movements at the intersection, the roundabout was selected because it does help reduce the higher probabilities as far as injuries, serious injuries, and fatalities with the movements that would be encountered at that intersection. There is a new signal proposed at Retta Esplanade. That's flexible also. We're keeping it in. Several things I've heard, and they're not official, but there is some, I guess, interest in that area. And we'd be working with whoever's in that area as far as whether the traffic signal or some other type of treatment up at Retta Esplanade would be suitable for the type of development to go in there. And that's still, like I said, just because we're approving a concept to move forward today into design doesn't mean that we still have a year and a half to make sure that as we work with y'all and if those development desires come to fruition, is that we can't make modifications as we go. However, it's better just to keep things in and see what goes on until they change. We've also proposed to start introducing elements of a shared use path wherever we have available, and also to have HAWK, or what we call high intensity walking traffic signals for those areas where we would predict higher levels of pedestrian and bicycle activity because of some modifications of the circulation plan that we're proposing. We've also incorporated modifications to Nesbitt Street in order to accommodate bicycle traffic being routed onto that road for elements of 41. That includes modifications to the traffic signals at Marion and also Olympia, and making some modifications as far as pavement marking dedications and signage to show that as far as being the desired and primary bike route. Last thing is that it's, as you know right now, US 41 northbound, it's a 3-lane road with basically what we call an auxiliary lane that's not dedicated. It just allows people to basically whip around and freer movement. We propose on changing to that 3rd lane to dedicated turn lanes for the major intersections as you go through the street, and then keeping a consistent, continuous path basically from Williams all the way through the downtown of 2 through lanes that take you over the existing bridge over the Peace River. So with that, I'm going to keep moving forward with some concepts. So we're going to start at the south end. North, unfortunately, goes this way on your drawing, so it's pointed down towards the right corner. But you can see we're going to start at just north of Williams Street, and that we're showing, again, there's a lot of elements that, as it goes into design, that we'll be able to move forward better as we get better information, is to try to introduce a shared use path and still keeping a little bit of a shoulder for 2 reasons. One, as we go through in these urban conditions, is that to try to get the bicyclists encouraged on the path and to move forward that way, but also we have other issues with drainage, and we call this gutter spread, where we have a couple feet of water that usually piles up around the gutter, so we try to leave, when we're doing these rehab jobs, a few extra feet that are on the shoulder of the road. And there are still people that are hardcore bicyclists that do like to ride with the traffic. However, we know that's the reason why we introduced the shared use path, is because through our survey, the greater majority of them are more desirable to ride on a shared use path versus on the road. And that's been with discussions with y'all also. And as you can see, the roundabout, basically the roundabout will afford more movements at the intersection. It'll allow for Carmelita traffic to enter the roundabout, go southbound. It will allow for southbound US 41 traffic to make the U-turn, and also to be able to make a left turn on the Carmelita. And it serves as a nice slowing down point, as in a kind of like an entryway feature to downtown, to kind of introduce people that it's like, hey, you're coming into downtown on the northbound side of 41. You'll also notice that we have pedestrian crossings at the north side, and I'm going to kind of slide the cursor. There's a pedestrian crossing here proposed just north of the shared use path. And the reason the location of that one, I just wanted to point out, we did some extensive coordination with Sacred Heart Church. They have a program, they have many daily programs at the rectory on the west side of US 41 southbound, and they bring them over to the other side, to the main church hall. And so in talking with the church, they agreed to shut their driveway down on US 41 that serves the rectory on the west side so we could relocate that potential pedestrian crossing to better serve both the church and the shared use trail, and they were pretty happy with that. So, and that's kind of some of the coordination that we went through as far as trying to work with the community. I'm going to go ahead and go to the next slide here. So as we're heading northbound, you'll see that we maintain 2 through lanes coming through at Taylor Road. The reason being, whoops, I got to back up here now. Let me see. There we go. Sorry. I'm a little bit too tappy with my fingers here today. Is that with the proposed city's pedestrian and bicycle network, there's a lot of crossage in here. It's you have coming from the linear trail that you can go Carmelita to the shared use path on Taylor. And also, as you'll see later on in the presentation, is that we're proposing also an additional pedestrian crossing here and keeping the road narrower, because you can also come across Charlotte, cross northbound 41 and start heading Nesbit in different areas as far as that proposed future shared use path and the bicycle path and some other paths further down the road. As we get over here into this corner, you can see right after we pass Charlotte going northbound, this is where we start introducing dedicated turn lanes. We have a dedicated left turn lane for Virginia. We're also proposing, as I go to the next slide, as you pass Virginia, is that we keep the traffic into 2 lanes. We'll use probably we're recommending some kind of mountable restrictive thing that prevents people from blasting through those turns, but still allows fire trucks and emergency vehicles possibly to come around and be able to mount and keep on going through those intersections. The 2 lanes are contiguous. We did include a right turn at Marion, because that is US 17 heading northbound, and that was a dedicated right turn lane. And you can see the slight shift in the main traffic as we continue northward and we get to, that was Olympia, make the right turn at Olympia. And then as we continue northbound, we introduce a left turn lane at Marion. We also complete the crosswalk and continue with just having the dedicated 2 lanes to proceed northbound over the 41 bridge. As we get up to Retta Esplanade and where it begins to pinch down, we have 2 concepts that I'll kind of jump up and show. The first one is still the left turn lane that goes within there, the proposed traffic signal. The third lane, it's there, but we're striping it out. It's because it's to make sure that we make people merge in and have just 2 lanes of traffic, and we'll also try, have the same treatments to prevent people from blasting through that intersection and trying to beat everybody else over the bridge. But this is just based on one scenario, and just to show the flexibility is that on the next slide here, we did the same thing, but we have a right turn lane at Red Esplanade, just depending on when development and stuff like that may come in, and it may be a different concept. However, we do have the flexibility to change it because most of this stuff is fairly simple, just pavement markings on asphalt. So, as a commitment as far as us, and as I move this on to the design team, we'll make sure there's terms and conditions, and if you guys want continued updates as far as that goes, or coordination as far as any development interests that go in there, we are more than happy to be able to accommodate that for another 1.5 years as it goes through design. Again, today I'm just asking that it's okay for this concept to move forward. The last thing that we've added is that, so again, I had noted that up here at Charlotte, we had put in a crossing because we propose, as you're going northbound, of course, as I've told you prior, is that we would have had to put the bicyclists on the street, and we don't, and as per your desires, we're wishing to reroute them. So we're going to use bike designation signs pretty much like this to indicate that the route actually is coming over Charlotte, coming up Nesbit. You can continue through Olympia, Marion, all the way up to Red Esplanade, where you would pick back up with our shared use path and be able to go north. Some of the shoulder striping and stuff you see, again, it's a combination of gutter spread, but then also there might be the occasional time where people do ride their bikes and they do want to access businesses for that area as downtown, so it is a safer area just in case they so desire to go. And that's still part of what we have to do as a Department of Transportation. As we move forward and the road moves forward being built, is that it's the full intention of the department to try to connect that shared use path, eliminate that bicycle traffic on US 41 entirely. But we're just kind of stepping through it time and time again, working with y'all's pedestrian and bicycle plan and trying to implement it. So we can't get everything done because we do have restrictions, but we can get as much as we can done. And hopefully I've demonstrated that we've been working with the community and also with the council trying to do that. Estimated costs, they really haven't changed that much. We've added a few other features, an extra pedestrian signal here and there, and that's also to accommodate the increased proposed usage for rerouting stuff along Charlotte down along Nesbit. And the cost right around $6.2 million. It doesn't include, these are just pure construction costs. There's still, we have a little bit of right-of-way associated with the roundabout. We still have to do the design and the construction and everything, so there's probably another 15 to 20% added on that total. Some of the benefits, as you can see, with the concept we have here, we're pretty much getting everything that everybody had said is the main desires and goals of the council. We're trying to get that bicycle traffic shifted. We're trying to do the best as we can, but we're also limited in trying to work with the budget. And again, we will continue to coordinate with the council, the future council, throughout the design process. We can come back as requested, or we can set up regular updates. We'll leave it up to y'all's preference. The next steps, even though we're calling it a lane repurposing report, the folks in Tallahassee really didn't know what to do with this project, so they were continuing with the report as far as converting auxiliary lanes into dedicated turn lanes, and that's just part of a departmental process. We do plan on having a public meeting or information meeting in the spring of this year because of the right-of-way associated and the changes associated with the roundabout, and that's a statutory requirement that we have to do. And then we're going to complete, based on the disposition of the board today, the environmental and the NEPA process that we have to do and complete that in June. And hopefully with y'all's concurrence, we're going to move through to design. And leaving with a safety moment, again, we can try to build as many shared use paths and everything as we want. However, there are still people that insist on riding on the side of the road or being in there and just with other vehicles. Be safe, share the road. This morning, I got rerouted 30 miles by a crazy DOT from a detour. We were jammed onto a little country road with semis and everything like that, and everybody had to be more respectful just of the space we're dealing with. Those DOT people, they make me go crazy. Anyway.
Welcome to the club.
Well, this one was unexpected, because I'm late and I'm arriving here and it's like, oh, great, the road's closed. But anyways, I want to thank everybody for their participation. And like I said, I think we're showing, hopefully, that the DOT is really, really trying hard to kind of a new way of business. We're struggling through it. I'm also working on another project where I'm taking a 2-lane road to 4 lanes through some of the most environmentally sensitive area, and they want it done in 18 months. We're trying to accelerate things. We're trying to incorporate more positive elements of the community into these projects in order to try to, just not be the big DOT that comes in and screws stuff up all the time. We do that enough. We're trying to change that. So anyways, thank y'all.
Thank you. Questions? Jaha?
My, I guess concerns I have are that this looks like it ultimately will create the conditions that you see in downtown Sarasota, in that it was a plan that's planned maybe 10 years before, and then the world changed. I say this because downtown Punta Gorda is in a dynamic time right now. We're redoing our codes. We have the possibility of revitalizing the downtown, which will change the entire traffic landscape. And my concern is that this is very rigid and it doesn't account for a change in our downtown. It plans for now, but doesn't plan for maybe even 2 to 5 years from now. And then additionally, across the bridge, we're having a major development. I just wonder if, I guess 2 things, the traffic element, whether that's considered, because it seems like with certainty, horrific traffic will be created from this. And 2, the age of our community is that putting a roundabout just coming into our center of our downtown, which is going to be probably very different downtown, just doesn't seem like otherwise, I mean, I see like in Sarasota, you have like Ringling, that's kind of an off street, but this is our main road. And I find that like the use of these, they can be used in places where they're not so critical, but I just wonder if that aspect was being heard, because I just say that this is too critical coming into our downtown, but also pinching the road when we certainly will have so much more traffic, probably really 2 to 5 years from now, that I think that by the time this gets underway, it'll be planning for now, and our now is not what our future is going to look like, even our short-term future, and that's the only thing I think about.
I would politely disagree in the fact that we did look at your comprehensive plan. We've looked at your future circulation elements. We understand it's a dynamic that's changing. The only one rigid thing we're recommending is the roundabout, and that's because of the fact that, and I'm saying this politely, is that Florida drivers do not respect traffic signals. It's a high priority. It's one of our top focus groups as far as our statewide safety plan.
But there's no traffic signal at that location.
Understood, is that it is right now an unsignalized location. The request was made to evaluate it in order to accommodate more movements and allow for better facilitate of traffic on Carmelita and also on 41. We go through now, and it's a mandate by central office, what is called a intersection control evaluation study, where we take the location that's under study and do a series of tests on it to determine what's the most feasible and practical intersection that will reduce serious and fatal injuries. Fender benders, minor stuff like that, even though as irritating as they are, it's something that we will never get away from, just backing out in a parking lot or something, you're going, the probability of hitting. But fatalities and serious injuries are a major concern, because Florida drivers have a total disrespect of traffic control when these things happen. And out of the evaluation that was conducted, because of the desire to have a left turn to southbound Carmelita, a left turn southbound on 41 to Carmelita, is that the roundabout was chosen because it does help, one, slow down speed as you come in, and it makes people more focused as far as how they traverse the intersections. So, and that was conducted with study. That's where I was saying that's actually not my decision. That's decisions by the department and other groups and that are experts in this area. And that's as far as the safety for the roundabout. As far as looking into the future, as you get north of there, all of these improvements are fairly superficial in the fact that they are striping. That element of the asphalt is still the 35 to 40 feet that's there. And it would be most flexible as far as being able to change that striping pattern to do that. However, one of our primary goals, and as a part of becoming a more vibrant and downtown area where there's more interaction of pedestrians with traffic, is we're working on what we call target speed. And with the design that we have, I've shown in previous presentations, is that it will help us maintain a target speed of between 18 and 25 miles an hour, which is the highest survivability rate as far as with pedestrian interactions with traffic. And so that's another goal of the design that we have. So we feel that as far as with congestion, yes, there will be slowdowns, stuff like that, but it is a downtown area and you have to expect that. But however, that it will maintain focus on the fact that when you're down there by Taylor, you have 2 distinct lanes that'll get you to the bridge, and you have turn lanes that'll help pull that traffic out, but it also helps control that speed but like I said, that target range between 18 to 25 miles an hour. So we feel that we have kind of looked at that, just to kind of counter your
I hear that.
request.
But the other side, have they looked at a demographic in terms of
Yes, sir.
age and roundabouts as well?
Yes, sir, we have. And don't get me wrong, it's challenging, but it's challenging for younger drivers. It's a different treatment that we all just have to learn to use. There's 2 rules, or 1 rule. You have to yield for traffic in the roundabout. And if once people understand that, they do work fairly simply. I'm sorry, there's other questions.
Nancy first.
Yeah, I see it a little differently, living on the south end of town and coming north all the time. Traffic seems to be more contained. I would say as soon as we get into the 3 lanes, it's like Katie bar the door. And it has never made sense to me. I think maintaining a flow, and I also feel that there are people who they're not coming to Punta Gorda. They're using 41 from Fort Myers to wherever they're going. If they can't go fast enough, then get over and get on 75. And that's what 75 is for. So we want people to enjoy Punta Gorda. And so I see this has the more potential. I really appreciate your listening and to our concerns and being flexible as we proceed in the next year and a half, because I think that things could be changing around here, and so there's room for that. So as much, and I like the idea of the hawk signal. I think we could learn from that, because where we have crosswalks that are like we're on our linear park, and we have problems where people move here from other states, and they don't know that you don't have to stop if somebody's just standing on the side of the road, but they stop anyway. So we end up, with almost collisions, rear-end kind of accidents. So perhaps these hawk, I don't know what the cost is, but could be a good idea to at least investigate for those. But the other thing I have a question about, and I realize this may be not your responsibility, but as I was listening to all of this, and I appreciate all of your attention and interaction with us, there are other projects going on 41. And the team, the FDOT team, seems to invite participation, but won't listen. And I am really, and I know this is my last council meeting sitting here like this, but I'm fed up. I'm fed up with FDOT trying to drive US 41 traffic on side streets. And they've done it in the community in which I live, in Burnt Star Isles on Tripoli, and they will not listen to us. We have tried to suggest Diplomat Parkway that was designed by FDOT in Fort Myers, and they claim they don't even know what it is, was a beautiful solution that could work at Madrid, and it could work at Rio Villa, but they won't listen. And they're determined they're going to do it their way. And they're going to drive traffic now down Baynard, which is it's not even legitimately 2 lane. And they're going to drive traffic down the street. And then to go on to Akiasta, which is already an intersection that is got too much traffic. So, but they're serving their purpose. And I'm fed up with it. And I don't know if I don't know if it's a legislative agenda item to actually talk to our legislators, to be able to say, no, FDOT can't drive their traffic down side streets, and which is what is going on. So I have to bring it up at this point in time, because it's something we have talked about time and time again, and I know that it's not you, it's not your project.
I can offer this up, I know this is for the, quote, access management project that's just south of town over there, is that, I can go back to our leadership and say, hey, I'm getting beat up for no reason, but that we need to possibly set up a meeting with the city manager and with.
Well, I know that our mayor sits on the MPO, has listened to these conversations, has opined vehemently at the MPO meetings.
Just did it Monday. Just did it again on Monday.
And so it's like, no matter who talks to who, it doesn't work.
I can be a little bit more obnoxious
And I don't know that what we're going to do if we have
internal.
to talk to the governor. It's like, it's driving me nuts, so.
Let me, and I said this quietly, but I can say like, at work, I can be a little bit more obnoxious, to say it in a, I don't know, better word or term or something like that, to see if I can get something set up at least to hear, because it's a concern as far as, I'm more rank and file. I'm just a manager for a certain group, but again, if it's that disconcerting, then, sometimes it's people like me that need to come back, and when I see LK or somebody, it's like, hey, I'm getting beat up for no reason because you guys won't take 10 minutes out of your day and listen. And I know that LK's at those meetings, but sometimes I can be more irritating.
Yeah, it's like, they'll say, well, we've got our book, and Madrid is too close to the intersection of, but this is a solution that could work and be it would not signalize the entire of 41. It would allow traffic to flow northbound uninterrupted. It's only the southbound traffic which would be signalized, and to me, it's a very safe solution, and listening to the public and to respect. I think when I look at the FDOT mission, and you want quality of life, and you want to promote economic development, and you want all these things to happen, and then your actions are completely the opposite. And it's disruptive, and and the residents have been opining like crazy. I know that we keep sending all
get
these
the
things.
complaints forwarded over, and
You've had them all.
Yes,
like
ma'am.
All 75 or whatever they are, but.
it's a pretty good number, but I have to say, most of them are for the other project, not mine.
But it's like, it is like, well, I'm sorry, we're FDOT, we know better. And so I just had to say it, had to get it off my chest. I guess maybe it's for another discussion to figure out, do we need to go to our legislators and go around FDOT? I think we may be at that point that it might have to be bringing another hammer in, so.
Yeah, I concur with your
So,
comments,
anyway.
and we had
Sorry
the
to-
discussion again on Monday. And Mitchell Austin was also at that meeting, and we talked extensively about Baynard, because it's such, I know that's not your project, and we shouldn't even be talking about this because it's not on the agenda, but the deal is, Baynard is not equipped for the possible transmission of vehicles that's gonna come across from Rio Villa to Akiastad. It's not equipped at all. It's way, way, way out of sync with the rest of the roads around it. Excuse me, and it's just insufficient. It's got to be fixed, and it's a county road in that segment, so we have a whole different dynamic dealing with the county and FDOT, because it's going to be a problem that FDOT creates by closing off the median at Rio Villa. So anyway, that's another conversation for another day. Debbie, you had comments.
Okay, this is going to be unbeating you up, okay?
Well, thank you.
I want to say that when I saw this, I was very pleased, because you ticked all my boxes. You fixed the things that I was the most upset with. And, I've told you from the beginning that I was open to the roundabout idea. I've lived in communities where they have been in existence for a long time, and everybody just uses them. My 82-year-old mother understands how they work, so I think Punta Gorda can probably handle it. The only thing that I am a little concerned about is the crosswalks at the roundabout. I'm not sure how that works, because if you are expecting a roundabout to just be traffic flow, and then all of a sudden somebody pushes the button and traffic has to stop for pedestrians, can you explain?
Yeah, to kind of back up also on the Councilman Cummings thing, is that in Sarasota, I was been working on that for 41 basically since 1999 when they did the Sarasota master plan, is that they have a roundabout corridor on US 41. Basically every major intersection is a roundabout. And we have been coming in and putting in hawk signals just on the exiting throats in order to allow these. And it's through a serious experimentation, we've got now the hawk set up to where the visibility is for the direction of the traffic flow, and it comes through, and because of the reduced speeds, is that it's much less of a probability of rear ends and all that as they're entering the roundabout. So it's experiment in progress. We just have completed, I think, and it was a developer-driven roundabout where they have the hawk signals on all four approaches of the roundabout. And it seems to be working fine. It's just a matter with the reduced speeds. So, and not to say that we won't make modifications in the future as we implement them, because we're going through a whole new process also. But they do seem to be working. And like I said, because of the slower speeds going through there now, that the rear ends or the concerns that you have that people all of a sudden stopping because of a hawk being on, is that we're not seeing that.
Okay, well, that's good.
And if they are, they're very minor. And again, we will trade 100 property crashes every day for injury or fatality crashes. Yeah. I mean, you can get your car fixed, but it's really hard, when you have a broken leg or broken arm, or God forbid you die. And that's our main, you can fix a car. And so that's our main concern, is to slow those people down. And you'll see on any of our cameras is that you see basically just a steady stream of traffic that comes down here. So they're working and they're slowing people down.
Okay. But I do appreciate your taking the time to actually hear. I mean, you're the first FDOT
Don't
group
say that.
I really, your group has been the first one that I have felt has been receptive at all to anything we've had to say. So thank you very much for that.
You're very welcome, and I will try to do something for the other part. I've seen them come through and I've seen the complaints, I just didn't realize it was boiling that hard.
Oh, it is.
Oh, yeah.
It is not, it hasn't even festered yet.
Okay. I will bring that back to my leadership.
I've talked to Wayne last night.
Oh, did you?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, John.
Sorry.
Well, I think everything's been said already, probably several times. But I certainly agree with the major complaint for the south side there, that just has to be looked at and changed somehow. It's just not working for anybody. The rest of the project that you've completed and worked with us so diligently on, I think is in a good spot right now. If it's easier to think, I think of it as you've got a 2-lane coming into from the south, and you've got 2 lanes going over the bridge. And somewhere in the middle there, we got 3 lanes. And it just has been messed up forever. It doesn't work. You've made room for turn lanes now, so that people can still maintain those 2 full lanes and not interrupt anything. So I think we've probably, without making the whole road wider, I think this is the best solution we could accommodate. So I'm in favor of proceeding.
Thank you, sir.
I haven't talked yet, so I have a few questions. And that was intentional, by the way.
No worries.
So, thank you for working with the city staff on the bicycle path diversion to Nesbit. I think that's going to be a huge asset. That was one of my biggest concerns, and you and I talked about that a number of times. What came up at the MPO meeting the other day was Commissioner Constance asked if we could address the speed limit on Nesbit, because going hand in hand with this project, the speed limit needs to be reduced from probably Virginia up to Lashley Park, because that's going to be the main thoroughfare for bicycle traffic as well as vehicles, and it's already a very precarious couple of intersections that they have to go through. But when they come off of Marion going westbound and they go to Lashley Park, they speed up, or if they come off of Esplanade to go into Lashley Park, they speed up. And there are condos in there, and there's the Vietnam Wall, and there's all kinds of other things back there. The concern is that people from the condos can't get out of their street, for one thing. They can't get out of their street from the courthouse, or the Justice Center, they call it there. And so we need to take a look at the speed limit on Nesbit, because it's actually too fast for the current amount of flow of traffic that goes in and out of that little corridor there. So that's one thing we should also address as part of this project. I got a concern about the roundabout with regard to a lot of the semi-traffic that goes down that corridor to all of the car dealerships specifically. They want to make sure that the roundabout is sufficiently wide and can accommodate all of the commercial delivery trucks that are going down that corridor. And the other thing that I got, it was interesting, I got an email forwarded from a certain FDOT person, which was with regard to Patrick Fuller's comments on the emergency access.
Okay.
With vehicles that have to access that left lane going northbound. If we put any bulbs of any kind, how are the emergency vehicles going to get around traffic if they have to go anywhere from the police station up to the bridges or beyond the bridges? And so I had the police and the fire chiefs weigh in, and if I may ask Chief Briggs to come in and just comment briefly, he's in the other room. I would like just to have him give a brief recap of what he sent to me.
Yeah, sure.
Absolutely. Chief Briggs of Punta Gorda Fire. So in our conversation, the email, and again, I had conversation with Patrick Fuller from Charlotte County Emergency Management as well. And so you stated our concern perfectly, that anything that would impede our response, anything that adds response time, certainly we're not in favor of. So taking that left lane, and I realize striping is not always as effective as, for everyday traffic, but it's certainly something that we can use. We've also had discussion, I know you did this morning, about mountable islands or whatever we're going to call them. And so certainly that's something that we can get around, so that's a better option, just nothing that would be so hard that we can't access that left lane.
No, and we've been having a lot of success, and what we're proposing to the project design team is probably a different material. Instead of asphalt, it's possibly, it's a concrete apron, but we can design it such that you put about a 2-inch lip on it, but it optically to the public, it looks like it's a little bit more formidable than that. We've used it in other locations as far as with roundabouts, and it's basically just taking concrete and boxing it in and making it look like it's it's an optical illusion. And then with that combined with the frangible sticks and other treatments like that, is that we can look at things that are mountable and don't deter emergency vehicle access or use. And that's one of the definite recommendations that we're carrying on to the design team. The concepts, and don't get me wrong, the concepts I've shown you are kind of overreaching, but like details like signs and stuff like that and the curbing, is that if you want, as we proceed forward, I can make sure the design team comes back with those specific issues as far as making sure that it satisfies the needs. And that's just a condition we can put on our design team. And I'm involved in the project throughout. And like I said, I can be irritating and make it happen.
Okay. Well, thank you for addressing the concerns.
Thank you, Ray.
And again, I know I speak for both, law
police
enforcement and fire EMS.
Absolutely. And that's a question we've been working on because there's a lot of other concepts. We're working in Bradenton for what they call bat lanes. And that's taking on a 6-lane road and making the outside lanes basically bus lanes and right turn lanes for all the businesses. But then we also have added in the fact that emergency vehicles need to be able to access those lanes and use them in the same way as basically getting around and improving their response times. As you know, the whole West Coast, I mean, I've lived here since 1968. It's no longer just the lazy little fishing towns and, nothing in between Sebring and until you get basically to Punta. We're basically urbanizing basically from Naples all the way up to Tampa. And we're going to have to look at being able to maintain response times, but also looking at traffic being slowed down naturally just because of congestion and increased pedestrian and stuff like that. So we are looking at a whole host of different kind of options, concrete texturing, stuff like that, in order to make this work. And again, we're trying to do it very flexibly because we are experimenting and trying to get the best results. And we can come back and make sure you guys get the best results too.
Thank you,
Thank
Chief.
you.
Yeah, and I asked Chief Davis from the police department for her comments as well. And she basically did say that she would like to see better speed control in that corridor, and that painting the road is not necessarily the solution because the paint fades and it has to be maintained at all times. So, I was concerned because that's something we haven't talked about in all of our discussions. The EMS vehicles was never part of any of the discussions that we had.
No, we've talked with the chief.
Okay, well, I
no,
wasn't
no,
involved in
understood.
conversations that talked about that, so I wanted to make sure I had their comments for today.
Yes, ma'am.
So, but I will say thank you for making the changes we've discussed for the last 2 years, 3 years, I don't know how long it's been.
I've only been involved since December, but it's been going on for 2 to 3 years.
It feels
yes,
like
ma'am.
5 years, but okay.
I tend to do that.
But, you did address a lot of the concerns that we've talked about, and you did incorporate a lot of the things we've gone on and on and on about at various meetings. And I do think we do need to address the lower corridor in a separate conversation. And I will talk to Wayne and LK about that. But, I think at this point, you've done just about everything that we've discussed that had to be done, and I support it. And Jaha, you have a comment?
Just want to thank you. Your team has done like a ridiculously comprehensive job of dealing with this.
Thank you.
Really. And secondly, I was on a freight meeting yesterday, and one of the best meetings I've probably had in my life was your team dealing with the supply chain issues. Really have to commend them.
No, okay, well, thank you very much. We're trying. We just got to get LK and them guys to listen. No, I'm kidding. I'm retiring soon, so I can just be whatever I want to do.
Sure, you're going to throw this in somebody else's lap. Good move, good move. Okay. So, anybody have any other comments? Okay, then we need a motion to approve the concept.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the concept of the vision study for FDOT on the Northern Tamiami Trail corridor. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'm sure we'll be talking soon.
Oh, yeah, definitely, we will. Thank y'all, have
you.
a great week, and for the rest of y'all that are cutting out later on or whatever, good luck, and I'll be back and talk to the new guys.
Thanks.
Or the ladies.
Okay, thank you. All right, next on the agenda is consideration to modify the City of Punta Gorda Shell Creek Water Treatment Plant Water Use Permit, number 200000871.013, to comply with proposed minimum flows for Lower Shell Creek.
Good morning. Chuck Pavlos, Utilities Director. Again, this topic's going to be the minimum flows for Lower Shell Creek. The Water Management District is required to establish minimum flows and levels for various water bodies, and working with the staff for over 10 years, I think it's been. We finally have a proposed minimum flows for Lower Shell Creek. It's important to us because Shell Creek is where it's the raw water source for our surface water plant. So it's important for us to understand the impacts of implementing these minimum flows. With us today, we've got several representatives from the district, and Jonas is going to be making a presentation, giving you a little background on minimum flows and how they went through their process to establish the minimum flows that they're proposing. Also with us, we've got Laura from Corolla Engineering. It's been exceptionally helpful to us in discussions with the district. And then once the minimum flows have been proposed, we relied on Laura to help us model what is that effect on our water source. So she was able to model looking backwards, where we have actual data of our withdrawals and the flows, and if the MF minimum flows were in place, what impact that would have had on us, and then look forward on our projected growth to see the impact on that. I do want to commend the district staff. While we didn't always agree with them, they were always willing to listen to our concerns, and I think to try to accommodate us as best we could. I can't thank Laura enough for the effort she gave, because I don't think we would have gotten to a point where we are without her help in doing that. And I do want to point out Steve Adams. I can assure you he represented the city extremely well. I'm sure the district has a dartboard with his face on it, for the dark side, but I think they respected that he was, doing his best to represent the city's interests. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Jonas.
Thank you, Chuck. Okay, good morning, Madam Mayor and members of the council. My name is Jonas Gile, and I am hydrologist with the Southwest Florida Water Management District. And today I'm here to present the recommended minimum flows for Lower Shell Creek. So my presentation will briefly cover why minimum flows development is needed and the technical work we conducted for developing the recommended minimum flows for Lower Shell Creek. And finally, the need for the city water use permit modification to meet the recommended minimum flows. So what is minimum flow? Minimum flow is defined by Florida statute as a limit at which further withdrawals would be significantly harmful to the water resources or ecology of the area. So minimum flow is a statutory requirement that the district need to develop for a water body to prevent significant harm due to withdrawals. Minimum flows development is often a long process, and once it's developed, it has to be peer-reviewed by independent scientists and stakeholders, and finally, it has to be approved by the district governing board. And once it's established in the rule, we use it for permitting and water use planning programs as well. And the state law also requires consideration of the following 10 environmental values when we develop minimum flows. So all these listed values were considered when we developed the recommended minimum flows for Lower Shell Creek. Okay, the next is to look at the minimum flows approach. So typically for flowing systems like Shell Creek, we apply percent of flow reduction. And with this approach, we evaluate how flows can be reduced by withdrawals without causing significant harm. And significant harm is not defined by Florida statute. So water management districts, they use different standards. And our standard is a 15% decrease in available habitat or resource, meaning the minimum flow has to protect at least 85% of the habitat. Another important component of the minimum flow process is the recovery and prevention strategy. So by law, the district is also mandated to investigate if a system needs a recovery or prevention strategy. Recovery strategy is needed if minimum flows are not currently met, and prevention strategy is required if minimum flows are projected not to be met in the next 20 years. So later I'm going to talk about the recovery and prevention strategy assessments for the Lower Shell Creek. Okay, and the next is the peer review process and stakeholder outreach. So last year, we prepared minimum flows report for the Lower Peace River and Lower Shell Creek. And the report was peer reviewed by 3 independent scientists from March to June 2020. And the peer review process was open to stakeholders and the public. And the panel was satisfied with the technical work conducted by district, and they supported the recommended minimum flows for both systems. And we met with the city staff and city consultant several times since 2019, and we have worked together to make the recommended minimum flows workable for both the environment and the city needs for water supply. And this year, we've presented the recommended minimum flows to Environmental Advisory Committee and to the Public Supply Advisory Committee. And both committees have appreciated the work conducted by the district, and they supported the recommended minimum flows for Lower Shell Creek. And on August 12th, we presented it to the Charlotte Heartland National Estuary Partnership, and they had no issue with the recommended minimum flows. Public workshop is scheduled now for November 3, and finally, presentation to the district governing board is in December. Okay, so on to the details of the Lower Shell Creek. So for minimum flows, the Lower Shell Creek is a segment from the dam to the confluence with Peace River. And as you may know, the district initially proposed minimum flows in 2010, but was rescheduled to 2020 for comprehensive analysis. And in the past 10 years, as part of the comprehensive analysis, the district funded a variety of biological and hydrological data collection projects to support the establishment of minimum flows. And as you all know, the district cooperatively funded the city's reverse osmosis project and the Peace River Interconnect projects as well. And obviously, those 2 projects are expected to improve the water supply reliability of the city. And those 2 projects will also help the city to meet the recommended minimum flows. So we modeled the Lower Peace River and Lower Shell Creek together as one system. And this helped us to better characterize the hydrology of the system. And as you may know, last year in December, the district governing board approved the recommended minimum flows for Lower Peace River. And the minimum flows became effective as a rule this year in April. And recently, the water use permit for the authority was modified to incorporate the recommended minimum flows for Lower Peace River. For the Lower Shell Creek, the minimum flows development was done last year, and the status assessment was completed this year. So we have now minimum flows that protects the environment and meets the city needs for water supply. Okay, so on the next few slides, I'm going to talk about some of the technical work we conducted for developing the minimum flows. The first technical work was the baseline flow development, and the baseline flow serves as a reference when we evaluate how flows could be reduced without causing significant harm to the resources. So for Lower Shell Creek, we used the gauge data from 1966 through 2018 and adjusted it for surface water withdrawn by the city from the reservoir and excess runoff added to the system from irrigated lands within the watershed. The graphs here show the hydrographs for baseline flow, the red one, and the gauged flow or impacted flow, the green one. So as you can see, from January through mid of July, and especially from May through mid of July, the gauged flow is higher than the baseline flow. And this is due to the high runoff contribution from irrigated lands within the watershed. Okay, then the next major task was to use the baseline flow and characterize the flow regime to represent low, medium, and high flow conditions, as is shown in the graph. So the first one is the low flow, or block one. We call it block one. And this happens when the flow is low, below 56 cubic feet per second. And this often happens from April through mid of June. And it accounts for almost 25% of the days within the year. Okay, and the second one is the block two, or the medium flow range. And this is when the flow is between 56 and 137 cubic feet per second, and often happens from November through end of March. And lastly, block three, or the high flow condition, when the flow is above 137 cubic feet per second. And most of the time happens in summertime from July through October. And this minimum flows development has also involved the use of hydrodynamic model. And this model was used to assess changes in salinities, water temperature, and many other hydraulic variables. The model was developed in 2010 and was used for the Lower Peace River minimum flows establishment. And in the past 10 years, as part of the comprehensive work, the model was upgraded massively by the district. And some of the improvements we've made are shown in the lower panel of this slide. I don't want to go in detail here and waste your time, but we have now a more calibrated and much improved model than we had in 2010. This improved model is peer-reviewed by the 3 independent scientists, and the science behind the model is already published in one of the peer-reviewed journals. Okay, and lastly, we've also expanded our ecological criteria to set up minimum flows. In 2010, the focus was only on salinity-based habitats, whereas in 2020, in addition to the salinity habitats, we've assessed habitats for 8 estuarine-dependent taxa, which are known to be sensitive to freshwater change. And we've also looked at the water qualities, the major ones, including DO, nitrans, and chlorophyll and color as well. And of all those variables, the low salinity volume, specifically the less than 2 practical salinity unit, was the most sensitive metric to flow reductions. This low salinity volume supports wide range of fish species, shoreline plants, and macro invertebrates as well. So here, at least, the 85% of this low salinity habitat need to be protected by the minimum flows. So based on that standard, we developed the recommended minimum flows for Lower Shore Creek for each flow-based regime. So when the flow is low, or in block 1, the habitats are sensitive to withdrawals. So withdrawal is limited to 13% of the flow. When the flow increases from block 1 to block 2, the medium flow range, withdrawals increase up to 23% of the flow. And when the flow is in higher range, it's less sensitive, withdrawals could reach up to 40% of the flow. The recommended minimum flows for Lower Peace River is also the same, since we studied the two systems together as one system. Okay, the next is to look at the recovery and prevention strategies. So as I have said earlier, the district is mandated to investigate if a system needs a recovery or prevention strategy. So with the use of the district cooperatively funded RO plant, the recommended Lower Shore Creek minimum flows are currently met, and no recovery strategy is needed. However, the recommended minimum flows are not projected to be met in the next 20 years. So by law, the district is required to concurrently adopt a prevention strategy. But the good news is the city is only required to modify the water use permit. No additional project is required. So in the past few months, we have worked together with the city utility staff and consultant, and we've drafted a water use permit modification letter that allows the city to meet the demands and ensure the recommended minimum flows are met in the next 20 years. Okay, so this table shows, this is the same table included in the water use permit modification letter provided as exhibit. So this table shows the maximum withdrawals from the reservoir for each flow-based blocks. Laura Bamberger is going to talk more about this, the implementation of this water use permit modification and its implication for the water supply reliability. So finally, I would like to take this opportunity to thank the utility staff and the consultant for working with us to make the recommended minimum flows workable for both the environment and the city needs for water supply. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Okay. Any questions?
Yeah, any questions?
Yeah.
But wait, there's
Got it
more.
all.
Yeah, there's more.
Oh, we have another presentation, I guess.
Yeah.
Yes. And the Water Management District certainly did a lot of work to help facilitate this. And of course, independently, we have a consultant also that has verified all the information as was prudent and come to very similar conclusions. So working with utility staff, we've come to a place where we feel that we can meet our water supply and still accommodate the statutory requirements of the minimum flow levels in Lower Shell Creek specifically that we're discussing.
Thank you. Good morning. Laura Bomberger with Corollo Engineers. And as Jonas mentioned, I'm going to talk about what the minimum flow restrictions would mean to the city's water supply, currently and out 20 years to 2040. So first, I wanted to give just a little bit more background on the city's water supply and what your projected demands are anticipated to be. So the city's current water use permit allows an annual average withdrawal of just over 8 million gallons per day on an average basis, and a peak month withdrawal of 11.7 million gallons per day. So that's the month of the year where you have the highest demands. On average, the allowed withdrawal is just over 11 MGD. In 2020, the average withdrawal was 6.38 MGD, including both sources. The city has 2 treatment facilities: the original Shell Creek Water Treatment Facility, which treats the surface water from Shell Creek on the city's reservoir, and the reverse osmosis facility, which was brought online last year in 2020. And this facility can produce up to 4 million gallons per day using brackish groundwater. The city also has an interconnect with the Peace River Minnesota Regional Water Supply Authority that can be used to transfer water as needed, both from the authority to the city and also from the city to the authority. This aerial photo shows, again, the Shell Creek Reservoir, which was made via the Hendrickson Dam. You can see the Lower Creek portion is over to the left, and in the lower right, you can see the inset of the water treatment facility. On the water treatment facility site, the original treatment plant is on the left, and the reverse osmosis was constructed over on the west side. I'm sorry, that'd be the east side. And that was brought online last July of 2020. In terms of your historical water demands to customers, this graph shows both the annual average and the maximum month demands that were provided to your city's residents, and also some residents of Charlotte County. So the water demand has increased from about 4.4 million gallons per day to 5.3 million gallons per day in the last 10 years. And on that maximum month, up to 6.5 MGD last year. The service area population is expected to increase from just under 40,000 people to over 47,000 people by 2040, and these are based on projections developed by the Water Management District. And the water demand similarly will be increasing from about 5.3 MGD up to 6.1 million gallons per day over the next 20 years. So Jonas mentioned the seasonal variation in the water supply or the stream flow, and that's similar to the change in water demand that you see in your utility. So usually your highest demand months are in the spring when people are wanting to irrigate. You have seasonal population here, and the demands are usually lower in the summer when there's not as much seasonal population and it rains more, so therefore people irrigate less. So we develop peaking factors for each month, and the peaking factor is essentially multiplied by the average for the year to estimate what the demand would be each month based on those conditions. So this was used in the modeling that we did to look at the water demands throughout the year. So first, just as a baseline, what would the water supply look like? What would it have looked like last year? What would it look like in 2020 if there was no minimum flow established, if you did not need to modify your water use permit? The chart on the left shows up through June of last year, you did provide all of your water solely with the Shell Creek Water Treatment Plant. Starting in July, you could start using, the city started using their reverse osmosis facility. For illustrative purposes, we have that at 2 MGD per month because they would not usually operate that at the full capacity of 4 MGD. But it would just show that throughout each month, the city could operate, at a steady 2 MGD of groundwater and make up the remainder with surface water. And in the future, if there was no MFL established, the city could continue doing that using just 2 MGD of groundwater and make up the remainder in surface water. However, with the MFL, as you'll see in some of the upcoming slides, The city will need to rely more on the RO and less on the surface water during the drier months in the spring during Block 1. So let's look and see what that would have looked like last year if the MFL would have been in place. So there's a few different parts to this slide. Jonas mentioned the 3 blocks, Block 1 being the lowest flow block, Block 2 being the medium, and Block 3 being high. So Block 1 is really the critical month when it comes to the city's water supply. That's the driest month, so therefore your demands are higher, and it's when the MFL is most restrictive. So looking at your monthly average demands for last year, the city, even if the MFL were to have been in place, could have still met all of its demands using 2 to 2.7 MGD of RO and the remainder using surface water. So in our model, we looked at using 2 MGD of RO as a baseline and then increase that if the surface water withdrawals were limited by the MFL. But you would have been able to meet your MFLs on a monthly average basis if they were to have been in place last year. In blocks 2 and 3, this is the higher flow times, medium and high flow, so there's not really any impact to the city's water withdrawals based on those flow blocks, but for illustrative purposes here, you can see, again, using 2 MGD of RO and the remainder surface water would meet demands in blocks 2 and 3. So the model looks at both monthly averages, but we also wanted to look at a maximum day condition because throughout each month there are variations in demands. So we also looked at, on a maximum day basis, how could the city meet its demands during that particular day of high demand. And last year the highest day demand was just over 8 million gallons. So instead of the 5.3 average, it was just over 8 MGD. So in this scenario, we assume that the city could ramp up its RO facility, providing 4 MGD from the RO, and make up the remainder using surface water. And if the withdrawal restrictions were such that the full demand could not be met, the city could then transfer some water from the Peace River Authority through the interconnect, and then transfer that water back to the authority later in the year when the flows are higher, so that you could still have a net zero at the end of the year. And I guess I should mention on this slide, this is if the maximum day occurred in Block 1. Usually Block 1 does not occur in the summer because it's the wetter condition, but if there was an extended drought, the model showed that you may need to transfer some water from the authority. And even in the summer, if there was a very severe drought and you happen to be in Block 1 in the summer, if there hadn't been much rain. So then let's look out to the future for the next 20 years. We looked at the same scenarios, monthly average water supply in Block 1. For this analysis, we did assume that the city would start using their reverse osmosis facility more, in particular in the spring, because as the demands increase and with the MFL in place, you will need to rely more on the RO facility. But this chart shows that on a monthly average basis, the city could meet its projected demands each month using your own sources, the RO at 3.5 MGD, and making up the rest with surface water. In blocks 2 and 3, when the withdrawal restrictions are not as stringent, you could operate the RO facility at only 2 MGD and make up the difference with surface water. Looking at the maximum day demand, which is expected to be just over 9 MGD in the future, because we applied that 1.5 times peaking factor to your average, the city would need to transfer more water from the authority on a maximum day condition out in 2040. So even with running the RO at 4 MGD, if you were in a Block 1 situation, the reservoir restrictions would be such that you'd need to transfer between 1.2 and 2.1 million gallons on that particular day of maximum demand from the authority. And the pipeline can accommodate that amount of water transfer. And then again, could transfer that back during Block 2 or 3 when the reservoir is full and the restrictions are not as significant. Maximum day demand, if they were to occur in Blocks 2 or 3 during the wetter times of the year, the city would have the option of running the RO at 4 MGD and only using about 5.2 from the surface water, or keeping the RO at 2 MGD and using 7.2 MGD to make up that demand from the surface water. So all of what we've presented thus far has looked at monthly averages. But we really wanted to dig in a little more detail on a day-to-day basis how the city would operate if the MFL were in place. So what we looked at was a daily implementation model of the MFL for 2020. And we looked at what your actual demands were each day, and if the MFL were in place, which facilities would be used, and to determine if a transfer would be needed from the authority or how much you could rely on the city's own sources. So we made some assumptions here that the RO would run at 2 MGD, but would be increased to 4 MGD if needed, if the surface water was restricted based on the MFL. And this analysis showed that the city would have needed that 0.21 million gallons transfer from the authority on April 4th of 2020, so one time during the year. Similarly, we wanted to look at what a daily implementation might look like in 2040. So we can't predict the stream flow conditions necessarily for 2040, but we used the 2020 stream flow conditions. 2020 was an average year in terms of some wetter times and some drier times. So we used the Shell Creek flows from 2020, but applied the higher 2040 demands to the model. And again, use the RO at 2 MGD as a baseline, increasing to 4 MGD when needed. And the result was that the city would need to transfer more water from the authority as your demands increase, and particularly those months in the spring and winter, March, April, May, and a little bit in January. So it's kind of hard to see the scale on the chart. So I have this pie graph which shows that in 2040, looking at this daily implementation analysis, the city would rely about 58.5% on your surface water, 41.2% on the RO, and then 0.3% of your total water supplied would come from the authority, which again could be transferred back. And the breakdown of that 0.3%, you can see the highest month is in March, about 2.6 million gallons, but that's spread over a number of days, not all in one day. So in working with your staff and the district, we came up with similar conclusions to what Jonas mentioned. We worked together to develop an MFL that protects environmental resources, but also allows the city to meet its water supply needs. The projected reliability of meeting your water demands using only your own sources of RO and the reservoir is 99.7% for 2040. And the remaining 0.3% could be met through transfers from the Peace River Authority, which could be returned when the city is not limited by the MFL in blocks 2 and 3 to have a net zero transfer at the end of a year. Jonas mentioned that this will be presented to the governing board. And one other recommendation that we had was that the city should work with the authority to amend your current water systems interconnect and water transfer contract to specify that the authority would help the city meet its peak demands in the future due to the MFL, because the current agreement does not specifically address that issue. And then the modification of the water use permit is needed to meet the proposed withdrawal limits. And that was what is included also in the agenda item today. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions? Jaha?
It's probably first for Greg and then relate to the two of you. We talked about the need for investing in, say, either or the RO or the surface water plant. And the parameters we're operating within right now are within, let's say, this 20-year level. We meet the recovery levels and we have this good ratio. Does this inform where we need to invest, like from this data we have now?
Actually, there's several things, yes. One, we know that we need the interconnection, which we now have, which makes it a regional utility, which is one of the reasons that Swift Mud could invest in the RO facility as part of our mitigation strategy. And we know that we're talking about if we fall below the 56 or in the block 1 condition. And if we do that and only have 4 MGD in RO, these statistics apply. If at some point in the future, in the next 20 years, when we're looking at upgrading our facilities overall, if we are able to invest in, say, an additional 2 MGD or an additional train of RO, it changes the whole complexity of this. And then thirdly, when we look at our interconnect with the authority right now and modification of that agreement accordingly, we always have that as certainly a backup, not only for this condition, but emergency conditions, which can go either direction. They may need us or we may need them. but the amount of money we currently have budgeted in the utility fund for capital projects, one of the future analysis will be where's that money best spent? What's most efficient for the city and the utility operation as far as investing in full capacity of our current surface water system, or do we put some of that in RO and upgrade the surface water system to a point that's necessary? So that's one of the analysis that will be done. But knowing that the Water Management District also over a period of time has looked at several options, including a bypass structure that was deemed not to be as feasible. The total with the analysis and all the additional detail that was used to come up with the 4 MGD essentially of withdrawal and block 1 conditions. And knowing that only if we hit block 1, we still have the ability long-term to upgrade our water supply from groundwater or use the interconnection, which makes us a regional utility. We still have a very reliable water source for our growth well into the future, for decades into the future, based on a aggressive growth management strategy that takes us to 2040. So, thank you.
Any other questions for staff?
If I just, I just want to be sure, as Laura said, you know, the backup is the interconnect with the authority. And today, we currently are transferring water in order to keep, we have 2 lines, and to keep those lines fresh, we send water back and forth. So currently, we are transferring water. They're transferring to us, and we're transferring back to them. So it'd just be a matter of adjusting how much on any one day. And like Laura said, we'll be able to send more back. If we need some, we'll be able to send more back. So there'll be no cost involved with that. So if you're comfortable, we would recommend that a motion be made to modify the water use permit with the district in order to accommodate the proposed minimum flows and authorize the city manager to execute that modification.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the recommendation to modify the city's water use permit, it's redundant on there, to incorporate the schedule of water withdrawals from Lower Shell Creek and authorize the city manager to sign permit modification. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Yes?
Question, and Chuck may be able to weigh in on this. Is there any movement to legislate municipalities offering reclaimed, so that it would, reclaimed water, which would then reduce the potable water usage? We don't offer reclaimed water here, but I've had people ask me in the past about using reclaimed water. It's just...
My experience, to install a reclaimed water system in an already developed community is very disruptive and expensive. You know, when I was at Cape Coral, we did it, but a lot of lots were not developed, vacant lots, and we put it in the same time we were putting in the water in the sewer system. So to go back now would be very difficult. It also is not a one-for-one. You know, one wastewater customer does not supply enough water, reclaimed water, for one, so you need another alternative source for that. In Cape Coral, they've got the canal system that they draw water out in order to supply the reclaim. So.
And the reason I ask is not because I understand exactly what you're saying, and I agree with you. Sometimes at the legislature level, things get imposed that may not necessarily be easily implemented. So
we have the experts. I don't know if they want to know.
Just a question. So
We're also, I mean, when you do deep well injection, you look at the water quality. We have a major project on the books right now for our wastewater system, and you look at the water quality going out. If you had, for example, someone that was going to develop a large subdivision with golf courses and different things where you could, you know, in theory, think about using some of your treated water, reclaimed, to provide a source there, especially for a land application type thing like a golf course irrigation. That then becomes a discussion point, but to go into existing communities, like Chuck said, is
Yeah,
just very, very
It is.
difficult, not to mention all the issues that go with reclaimed water usage. So,
Thank you.
Okay. Let's do an 8-minute break, and we'll come back at 11 o'clock.
Thank you.
Okay, it's 11 o'clock. We want to get back in session, please. John and City Manager.
Not me.
Mr. Miller.
Mr. Miller, paging Mr. Miller. There we go. Okay. All right, City Council is back in session, and next item on the agenda is the agreement award to Evoqua Water Technologies LLC of Sarasota, Florida for liquid hydrogen peroxide products and equipment.
Good morning, Ann Heinen, Procurement. The city currently has an agreement for the sulfide corrosion and odor control products for the wastewater collection system. It includes equipment and services, products, and that's due to expire in November. So in anticipation of the expiration, procurement released a solicitation for those services to continue after the expiration date. It was an invitation to bid. 149 vendors were noticed. 3 vendors did reply to the solicitation, and 1 vendor was declined due to not providing material information that we requested in the bid. The lowest responsive and responsible bidder was Evoqua Water Technologies. Based on the quantities that were provided by the department, the annual services will cost $281,000, approximately $500, $281,500 over, and that'll be a 5-year contract. Based on the new pricing for the 5-year contract, the city can realize an estimated annual savings of approximately $45,000 per year. So procurement is recommending, or staff is recommending award for this agreement to Evoqua Water Technologies as the lowest responsible and responsive bidder.
Thank you. Any questions for staff?
Move approval of the agreement to award to Evoqua Water Technologies, LLC of Sarasota.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the agreement to Evoqua Water Technologies. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Next is the expanding PGI Canal Maintenance District area to include Champaign Estates condos.
Good afternoon. For the record, Kathy Miller, Canal Maintenance. Today I would like to present and discuss the expansion of the Punta Gorda Isles Canal Maintenance District. In May of 2021, we received an application from Champaign Estates, which is a condominium located at 1600 West Marion Avenue, to be included into the district. There is approximately 242 lineal feet of seawall along their property. Part of the application process is they had to hire an outside company to evaluate the seawall, and they came back and and suggested that the seawall had structural issues and recommended replacement. City is on board with that. When our last assessment, which was performed on February 2021, the condition of the cap was rated a 4. Our ratings are from 1, which is a good cap, to a 5, which is a complete failure, and their cap was rated a 4, and their wall was rated a 3. So we agree with the recommendation. The applicant is here in the audience if there are any questions. Staff is also recommending that through the application, through the replacement process, that we sell the seawall panels to the applicant so that our structure is consistent with everything else we have in the system. We're looking at approximately 41 seawall panels. In August of this year, we took this application to the advisory board. They approved the application with the condition that we don't consider them in the district until they have replaced the seawall.
That was going to be my question. Yeah. Debbie?
Kathy, how did they make it this long without being in our system?
I don't know. It's an original wall. It's an original seawall and cap, you know, and I think they realized that they were having issues with their seawall as well. That's why we have been working with them on and off about including them in the district. But I think they realized the benefit of being part of the district, and there's...
I was asked, are the adjoining properties in our canal system?
Yes.
So somebody just decided that they didn't want to be in it, and and weren't?
I'm not real familiar with the history of how you became part of the district.
Oh, okay.
I think there was an application a long time ago. They just didn't participate at that time. This is a map of current properties that are in our district.
Yeah.
Let me see if I can.
So it looks like they're the only property that's not on that shoreline.
Correct.
That was the question that my team asked me. All of them came to me with, how did they get out of it?
So remember, the districts were actually created following the turnover of the canals from the original developer of PGI and then BGI to the city, so that the canals would then be, and the seawalls associated with them would then be the city's responsibility for maintenance, and the way to have funds was to establish this district. So I'm presuming that the area that includes the condo wasn't part of the development at that time. The other properties may have voluntarily sought to get in at some either early date or later date after the creation of the districts. And I'll also point out that this, as I mentioned this morning, this is one of those things that is a legislative decision, which is subject to your discretion. And the item is before you today. If you felt like that you would like to have this property within the district, the next step would be for you to request that staff prepare an ordinance for your adoption following a public hearing to amend the ordinance that talks about our districts.
Well, I think the solution you came up with was extremely equitable. I mean, I think, you really fixed the problem, and I think both parties are happy with this. I believe that was my understanding, and I think it sounds like an ideal situation, so I would be in favor of it.
And is the cap to our specification as well? Because I know when the seawall at my property was replaced, the cap was, much different than today than it was when the seawall was originally built. So will the cap be to our specification, everything be to our specification?
Yes, everything will be to our specification. And during the replacement process, we will be there every day to inspect, to make sure that the wall is built according to our standards.
And they're going to be using our contractor as well, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So when we do the approval, should we stipulate that it must be done before they are accepted into the district?
Yes, please. Is that correct, Mr. Levin?
Yes.
Okay, yes.
Yeah, okay.
And another benefit, of course, from our standpoint is we have adjacent seawalls that are in the district. So in the extreme, if this is rated 3 and the cap is at 4 now, if that completely failed, there is potential impact to adjacent seawalls also. So can certainly also help shore that up, so to speak.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay. We need a motion, please.
Motion to expand the PGI Canal District area to include Champaign Estates condominium with the condition that they first install the seawalls.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve the inclusion of Champaign Estates condos into the Canal Maintenance District with the stipulation of replacing this entire seawall on their property prior to being accepted. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
So we'll take the motion and the vote on the motion to direct staff to prepare the ordinance,
Right.
which is subject to a public hearing, so, it may not ultimately be adopted as part of the district, but now we have direction.
Good, okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Next item is septic to sewer area 123.
Yep, and Chuck will give some detail on this. This presentation is not intended to go into all the detail of how to construct this system.
Oh, thank
It's
you.
simply,
Thank you.
it's simply the abstract of, we have an engineering report back now, and what that engineering report recommends, and ultimately what the cost is going to be. We didn't want anyone to get out of here without hearing all this and knowing what you're going to have to be looking at in the future. So Chuck can go into some of that detail, and really it's informational as we get into our legislative initiatives, et cetera. So you have this information as we move forward.
Chuck Pavlis, Utilities Director. Several years ago, we had Jones Edmonds Engineers completed a sewer to septic master plan for the city. The master plan identified Charlotte Park area as the highest priority. Move forward. We recently engaged Giffords Webster engineers to prepare a preliminary engineering report to evaluate gravity and vacuum sewer alternatives, recommend the preferred alternative, and prepare a preliminary cost estimate. Results of the report indicate that a conventional vacuum system, in addition to some gravity sewer extensions, was determined to be the most cost-effective and least disruptive. The report recommends serving the Charlotte Park area with a mixture of 2 new vacuum systems to serve the east and west sides of the area, as well as extend some of the existing gravity systems for Almar Drive and Vasco Street to maximize the potential of the existing infrastructure. Cost is approximately, I think it's 25 million, which is about 20,000 per equivalent residential connection.
Ouch.
I just want to clarify that in the report, since they were evaluating vacuum to gravity, the cost is not the total project cost, it's only the differential costs were included for comparative purposes. So there are some soft costs such as surveying, easements, funding of legal services that were omitted from that. So but it's in the ballpark of 20,000 per lot. So we're at the point now in the study. The next steps would be to, if you want to move forward, to do a more detailed design, look at some funding options, come up with assessment methodology, and go forward.
And I think that's really the key thing where it says recommendations and next step. You can see that if we were going to move forward, you'd be talking about what type of system we want to put in the ground. But if we're proceeding, which you can see the, whatever that shape is, trapezoidal, if it says proceed with central sewer, there's 2 options. One, you don't and you just end the discussion. But the other one is that if we're at least still evaluating, the next option is looking at funding options, and that's where we are. So funding options could indeed include money from state or federal sources. So as we look at our legislative initiatives, if we want to add that as part of the discussion point, you needed to at least have this information that has now come in so that you knew what scope we're looking at as far as funding. Of course, we have 3 phases to this, but still, even if we're doing 400 homes, when the engineer looks at it, they look at where can we put master stations, so you're not just looking per phase, but what's most efficient and what the overall cost will be, and then we would look at phasing and funding options under the yes box, first one, funding being part of our legislative potentially request. So,
If I could, that's I think one important point. In the original study, we had, area 1, 2, and 3, and we're looking at them separately. For this report, I asked the engineer to look at the entire complex because there could be savings. And as you see, they were able to design it with just 2 vacuum stations versus if we did 1 area, we would have 3 vacuum stations. As a comparison, gravity would have required 9 pump stations. So there's, the added of finding the lots, buying the lots, disruption in the neighborhood.
Jaha.
I mean, looking at the Jones-Edmonds study, Riverside Drive area is equally a priority in terms of the harbor. I think that it would serve us better, being that it would be significantly less cost per house because there's an existing pump station, to do that first. And then we can make the argument to the state to help fund this as part 2. Because from the standpoint, if we're talking environmental, protecting the bay, Riverside Drive is equally as damaging in terms of nutrients. But I just think that it's a much easier bite for them to be able to absorb a few $1,000s per house as opposed to like $20,000 per house. I think that this is quite a bit too much to ask someone to have to invest in.
There's far less properties involved in the Riverside Drive project than there are in this project with all 3 phases. And I think this is a very critical location for us to be addressing first and foremost. And I thought we'd already voted on that. Nancy.
Question. I'd like for Greg to speak to the fact that as we go through this, and we are, as a body, really being very diligent about how we go about this and making the best decisions possible, that we heretofore have gone to the county, and the county has had the final say on what we do and the assessment. It seems to me like if we're being held accountable for this utility service area, that we should be able to make those decisions and approve the assessment without the county. And I'd like for you to comment on that, because I feel like going forward, it's not that I don't respect the county, but I feel like I know what happened before, back in, I want to say it was 2014, when San Sebastian voted, the homeowners association voted to convert from septic to sewer. But there was a small contingent of their homeowners association that did not approve it. And so when it got to the county commissioners listened to the people who didn't want it and turned it down. And it never proceeded, so that today they're still on septic. And we had approved it, but, you know, David had said to us as a city council that our decision, our vote was really, can we do the work, not are we approving to get it done? And so, but the county commission voted not to go forward and do the assessment or anything, and they wanted to pay for it themselves. It wasn't a matter of us doing any assessment. So I have concern about that, and feel like there needs to be some other option that would allow us to responsibly do what we need to do without having to feel like we may need to make a decision that's different than what the county is making overall. And I feel like this group, that we need to be able to do what we need to do in a very responsible way, but we may not be able to do things as exactly the way the county does it, so.
Right, and we're moving forward very cautiously but thoroughly on the decision tree for this whole project, because there's so much to it and we're a long way from the end of that. As far as the assessment, of course, we have no authority to do property assessments in Charlotte Park or in the county, but as part of our utility system, when it comes to the assessment itself, we have been doing some research for that very reason that you brought up. And it appears that if there is a benefit to our utility, that we can demonstrate that there is an allowance that we could determine the amount of assessment that we wanted to see on a tax bill, and we could levy that assessment ourselves. So the assessment itself, if we determined that there was a $5,000 assessment was appropriate and we got funding for the remaining cost, et cetera, it does appear that from what we're researching now that we have a mechanism to do that outside of the county. Now, as far as the process to have an area approved being put on public sewer as opposed to remaining on private systems, that's a different story, and I'm not exactly sure what that process is. I don't know if David off the top of his head knows what that is or not, or if that's just still within the city and our utility service area and whatever process it takes to allow a section of unserved property to come in. I'm not exactly sure what that process is. But if indeed we are at the point where we can serve them and it's a matter of funding, then we have a big chunk of funding that we need to do this. And as far as an assessment, there is a potential that we could levy an assessment at some level that you deemed appropriate to help make that happen. Now, if you do an assessment, of course, you have to cash flow everything up front. So you're still looking at money. So if you know, even if you do a $10 million assessment, you have to come up with that 10 million and then cash flow it. You know, if you're doing phase one, then phase two comes along, you're still cash flowing phase one, and phase three comes along. So there's a lot of analysis that needs done to really be able to make this whole project feasible for anyone, actually. And a lot of discussion with the council is going to have to happen.
Well, we can't just assess people 20,000 plus per property on all of these properties in Charlotte Park. I mean, that's a huge ask. And in some cases, it's more than the property's worth on vacant properties.
Well, if you did 20,000 even over a 20-year period with the cost of money, you're looking at $1,000 a year, $100 a month. You know, for 20 years, just to
That's a lot of money.
That's a lot of money.
I'm just saying, through all of our homework, and we've determined that, okay, this is the part that we're gonna ask each property to pay. This, we've secured funding, however this is, and we've done all of our homework, for us to then go to the county, to then get the county to weigh on it, it's like adding another layer of like, well, we don't like this, or we don't like that, and it's like, and it's not that I don't respect the county, this is the Punta Gorda utilities service area that we're responsible for. And so it's really kind of putting seems to me like as a utility service area, there needs to be some accommodation for the utility to be able to operate.
Yeah, that's where our research right now,
That's what I'm coming from.
why we were actually looking at whether or not we were able to provide an assessment. Now, how we get to that point, I don't know that, if it's our utility area and the county doesn't have any role in providing an assessment on the tax bill, if they have to approve it in some manner or not. Do you know that, David?
Well, I think the academic question is whether or not the septic to sewer is a utility issue per se, or is more of an environmental issue. And if it's more of an environmental issue to protect the water quality of our natural resources, that may be beyond the scope of our utility to mandate a connection that doesn't directly benefit the utility per se, but more directly benefits the environment. And I think that's a function of our enabling legislation, and that may be why the county would have to be part of that process, because, we're talking about unincorporated Charlotte County, not the incorporated provisions, locations within the city of Punta Gorda.
Except that the county commissioners have flat out stated that they are our water customers, and they are therefore our responsibility to put on sewer.
And that is, well,
Yeah.
That was what they
I mean,
said at the meeting we were at.
If that is in fact what the courts would say, then of course our response would be, well, then we shouldn't have to ask you for permission to get them on board.
Well, that's what was prompting my raising the question. Because it is, and I get the environmental aspect of this, and that there's such pressure to be responsible in this area. But it's almost like we have one arm tied behind our back. And so it's really very difficult for us to do.
More than likely, if we were to mandate a sewer to, a septic to sewer connection in those unincorporated areas, it wouldn't be the county that would be suing us, it would be the residents that would be opposing our authority. And at the moment, I'm not convinced that under our utility service authority that we can mandate that. I'm not comfortable in giving that opinion yet.
Debbie?
We're still down the road from.
One of my big concerns with this, and it was my concern when we first started doing this that I expressed to Howard, is, number one, what you're saying, that those people, we're going to have a riot over there. The second thing is, everybody we talk to when we talk about getting money from the state for this project or for any of our water projects, they always want us to be shovel-ready. And with a project of this magnitude, in order to be shovel-ready, we're already into it, millions and millions of dollars. So these issues have to be resolved before we can even go out and look for money. So it's kind of a catch-22. You need the money to start the project, but you can't start the project until you're sure, it's just, but I think the big word is shovel-ready, and we're a long way from that.
At this point, we've spent hundreds of thousands on the engineering reports and different funds to get to the point where, when you look at this decision tree on the recommended next steps, on the left-hand side, it's a very short tree. On the right-hand side, it's very long. So, if we do not have some supplemental money for this, just, even talking about a strict assessment is almost moot, because it would be so high. And of course, putting it on the customer base isn't an option either. Now, from a utility perspective, of course, the customers would pay 25% more than in-city, or that net amount, which is good for helping keep rates down inside if we're increasing our customer base. And from an environmental perspective, it's very easy to quantify the reduction of load onto the estuary and the receiving waters that this would provide. So that's not the issue. One of the state's primary objectives is water quality initiatives, and of course you look at Okeechobee and the Caloosahatchee and everything that's happening as it comes towards Southwest. So asking for an amount of money from the state is really almost paramount if we're even going to try to go down a decision tree. There's really not much option unless we get some grant funds, I think was the.
Jaha.
There's some existing money in the ARPA funding. That's what like DeSoto County, Arcadia, and them are doing in this regard. But I think if our intention is actually to do septic sewer, that it has to be viable. And in this case, we have the botanical gardens. We already have who want to do. We also have existing infrastructure that will make it very easy. I just don't see what the resistance is into wanting to do a viable project where the homeowners will be charged so far less. Is actually going to be doable, and then it makes the case that we're a responsible party in actually doing septic sewer. In this regard, we've not even begun to even engage residents of Charlotte Park. So this is like laughable because like they don't exist yet. We're just trying to do something to them, and no, we've not even begun that first step of that. If we're going to talking about this kind of money, this has to be grown very slowly, and this is one reason why the commissioners will say, go ahead and do what you're going to do, because they're not going to take that political heat of basically forcing this kind of money on people when, in fact, we actually have already spent a considerable amount of money on Riverside Drive to already create the foundation for doing this. If we're actually serious about septic sewer and helping the harbor, we have an existing situation which makes this very easy to begin doing right now.
Nancy?
I think I've had conversation with some residents in Charlotte Park who, when I first had conversation with them years ago, it was, there was no appetite for conversion. But, many years later now, it's in the conversations with those I've spoken to, there is a reality that they're going to need to convert, and that day is coming. And I have said to them, the day is coming. I don't know when it is, but it's coming. And you're going to need to convert, and it's not going to be the city coming to you. It's going to be, it could be the Florida Department of Environmental Protection that's coming in and say, the day is here. And so there's an acknowledgement. There has been an acknowledgement from some. I have not spoken to everybody, but from those I have spoken to, seems to be an acknowledgement that is, everyone knows the pressure. When I was on the Florida League of Cities, what's it called now? Natural Resources, Public Utilities, and something else committee, water quality was huge, and trying to press the state for them providing more funding for improving water quality. And so I don't know to what extent our legislative team is going to be able to provide such significant amounts of money.
Yeah.
Because we're talking big dollars.
Right.
Yeah.
We're not talking, nice to get $1 million for the book of grand, but we're talking
10 or 15 million.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I don't know that the state has those kind of funds, but that's what it's going to take.
Yeah.
So.
And, arguably, if indeed someone said, here's $50 million and you put the whole system in, once it's in, then the benefit to the property owner is substantial because, I've seen a lot of these areas, especially in sensitive locations that are on water and not sewer, and they'll start failing one by one, and then when there's property transfers, the septic system doesn't pass, and they can't transfer their property, and it just gets worse until the whole community, like you said, comes to a realization that at some point this is gonna be necessary. And, but, you know, once it is in, then of course, where they had their septic system, they can build a garage, or they can put that swimming pool they didn't have, and then they'll say, well, taxes are gonna go up because our property values go up, which, you know, is also, their property values will go up. But getting to that point is that whole decision tree that, you know, like you said, it's a very big ask to get the dollars in place to be able to, you know, start this process.
I support moving forward, just to keep progressing,
Keep moving things on.
keep moving things along.
You mean exploring funding options? for-
Yeah, I
and the-
think we have to
and
have
the
that in
process,
place
yes.
before we can do anything else.
As has been suggested. that we-
And the process of how we get there.
Whether it's grant funding or it's legislative money or whatever.
Well, just knowing that where the Florida League of Cities is focused, I think that it's responsible for us to really be moving in that direction so that we're prepared.
Yeah, I think we should have the plan fully in place before we move any of these projects forward, whether it's Riverside Drive or Charlotte Park or wherever it may be. I just don't think it's fair of us to go in and say, hey, by the way, you're getting assessed $20,000 for your sewer system that you don't really want. And I know several people that I've talked to in Charlotte Park have already told me that in many cases, they've just recently put in a new septic system and spent several $1,000s so that they could make sure that they were compliant. But you know, that's a concern. That's a very big concern, and I know that there's going to be a mass exodus if we don't do proper public awareness about it. So let's work on the funding part of it. Legislatively speaking, I think we need to be more in a position of talking with our legislators at this point, rather than asking them for money, because even though we have an open ear with Senator Albritton's office, with his water quality committee that he's chair of, I think we need to be in a position where we're ready to move forward on the project before we actually ask for the funds from them. Because, you know, just like the Boca Grande project, we got $1 million, which we won't get until this coming fiscal year. So we need to be able to have the money ready to be spent when we do ask for it and/or receive it. So I think we're a few years away from all of that. So I think we do move forward. I think I agree with you on that. I just think that we need to have more of a financial plan in place before we do anything further on it.
Which ties into our next legislative
Right.
item also.
Right, which is why I asked for that on the agenda, yeah. Okay, does everybody concur with that?
Yes.
Okay, all right. Then we talk next on the legislative initiatives.
The legislative initiatives, actually, we've just, for discussion, added a few categories that could be presented to the delegation. One was public safety. Under public safety, we've had a couple things. There's been some interest in looking at our Veterans Crisis Assistance Team. We have some funding needs outlined there, what would be required to improve the service we can provide for the veterans that are supported by our crisis assistance team. Obviously, when there's an issue in the city, we get the call. And when our team responds, which are all veterans themselves, there's a lot of things that they like to be able to provide as far as resources that could help. So that's something that, when we look at public safety initiatives, typically there's some money for public safety that's aside from a lot of the other things. And if we can try to ask for funding from different pots, you know, it never hurts, as opposed to everything in one. So that's one thing we could potentially look at. The other is for public safety, looking at some training structures that can be utilized by fire and police for tactical training, such as a training tower. We have our old Station 2 that has been used for some internal training, and the guys have done a great job of trying to build some things in there and make it into a very small training facility for specific local tactical type issues, not the big training facility resources that we also can use at the county and that type thing, but not redundancy, but something that we have locally that is specific to what we need here in Punta Gorda. And with that, you can see that if we have a fire training facility specifically, there's some cost associated with that we could also ask for as a combination grant for fire and police. That may be something to consider. When we look at economic development, which is another category, there's been some recent allocations for money for economic and job development north of us that potentially, if we had some infrastructure money, it would lend us to be able to help facilitate and improve our infrastructure that serves specific sites that are targeted for development. If we could get the money that helps us to do that on this end, and it facilitates some of the development and even potentially some of our annexation initiatives if we're looking at the periphery of our infrastructure systems that we could extend so that we have properties that, if they would annex into the city, are basically development ready. That could help facilitate those goals. So that's just another category that could be discussed. Water quality, excuse me, obviously septic to sewer. If someone wants to at least mention that we have this on our radar and it's going to take some money, we could always add that into our narrative. Riverside Drive, the force main there, of course, we put money into that so that we can upsize that for our portion, but we took that from another project. So if we could recover that money, that would help us put that back in the other large water line project to make that happen. That you can also quantify specifically as an environmental improvement, because there's several point source discharges. So, septic systems are non-point source. They go into the ground and they make their way to wherever they make their way. But if you have some of the trailer parks or different things that are out there now, and they already have a common system that goes to a location, and that's their little treatment plant, depending on how they treat it, and then it discharges into the estuary, a receiving stream, Peace River, wherever it goes. That's a point source discharge. And the state has now discussed regulations that says they're going to eliminate point source discharges. We were just talking about that in the hallway with the Water Management District. So if you have a point source discharge, you may very well have to drill a deep well and go to deep well injection instead. Fortunately for us, we already do deep well injection at our wastewater treatment facility, so that's one of the things we have a benefit. So it becomes much more lucrative for them to now connect to those force main systems that we will have out there and get those point source discharges out of the receiving waters, because they're going to be required to do it by the state. So we know that this is almost a septic to sewer type initiative, because it is a nutrient reduction initiative for our receiving stream. So we can also ask for money for that type thing. We're already building that, and of course there has been some question along the way with that about individual homes, et cetera, that would be tying into that, and that force main is not the mechanism for individual homes to tie into. We would be running another system that ties into that, or the pumping station to make that happen also. So we can always ask for septic to sewer, that area out there that's providing unsewered or public sewered areas into a public treatment facility is also a good initiative to reduce nutrient loadings. Any of those tie in with water quality. And then, of course, anything else that you may think is pertinent or think is not pertinent to discuss. This is only just to bring it up for discussion. The next meeting, we'd like to finalize the initiatives, and then we'll take those and we'll finalize that by the following Friday so we can submit something, and then we have our delegation meeting on the 10th.
Right, and the delegation meeting for everybody who plans to attend is at the Military Heritage Museum this year. It's not at the PGICA like it has been for the past several years. My personal feeling about the legislative requests, I think it should be a succinct list and not a lot of things, because I think it might congest the whole request process. And I think if we keep it to three, maybe 4 items maximum, I think we're more apt to get their attention than if we give them a whole wish list of projects we have that we'd like to see funded. That's just my personal feeling. I think it gets diluted too much if there's a lot of items on the request list. And we've only ever asked for 1 or 2 at a time.
I think this year it's an exception because of the fact that we're 50,000 people or less city. Any ARPA money we have has to come through them. So in this case, I think we should put our additional things. Let's see, if it was a different year, I would definitely agree with that. But in this case, we won't get it if we don't ask for it right now.
Well, we were cut originally from over $8 million down to our 2.4 because we were reclassified as a metropolitan city, So, you know, when you look at the county and some of their septic to sewer initiatives they're doing currently, they're using a lot of that money that they got a much bigger piece of that they can use for those initiatives. We don't have that. We've got 2.4 total that you'll be discussing at a future meeting where you would like to see that go also. And
We need to also put dollar amounts on each of these requests.
we
So
would
that's
have dollar
something we have
amounts.
to talk about.
Yeah, this is really just for discussion of the items.
Yep.
If there's items that you think are worthwhile, or you have others that are, then we'll, for next meeting, put the dollar values to it and come up with something so that you can do final approval, and then we'll move them forward.
Any other comments? Nancy?
Well, I was half being facetious, but I really am trying to figure out how are we going to crack the FDOT nut? And are we going to need to, how are we going to have to escalate this to get, you know, I think I liken this to if FDOT decided there's too much traffic turning right onto Olympia from 41 northbound, so let's divert all the traffic down East Virginia over to Cooper Street and up. And now we have all this 41 traffic going down East Virginia Street, and they don't care. They do not care. And so it's the same thing with Baynard. It's the same thing with Tripoli. They do not care. And so it's what are we going to do to get their attention? And I don't know that this is the avenue, but certainly FDOT using side streets, whether it's in the county side street, which it is, or a city side street. It's like that is a travesty. That's their design teams are and I don't know what it's going to take to get their attention.
And that does impact county and city because there's a lot of entrances to businesses along Baynard also, you know, a couple of which are.
May I suggest that we request a meeting with Mr. Grant? Maybe you and I can meet with him and talk about what might be a possibility legislatively speaking. I think that may be a starting point, and we can also do the same with Senator Albritton. I just think that we need to have that rapport with them anyway, and it might be a starting point if we could establish a time. I'll make myself available whenever it is, and if I have to move meetings around, I'll do that. But I think that's a way to start and get their attention that we're having a real problem here. I was very upset with FDOT on Monday at the MPO meeting. I really was. And I kind of want to, because I get a little passionate about it, because I'm the one that's been receiving.
thank
You
you.
guys have gotten copied on all of the emails that I received. It's been ridiculous how many people have commented about that location. And I don't remember, other than pickleball, I don't remember a time when we got that many emails.
It's a duplication of the Madrid issue.
It
And
is. It is.
If they would listen to us, they could solve both very easily, and it would be, I think, very graceful solutions, and but they won't listen.
No, and in fact, they're kind of bowing out of the Baynard thing because it's not their responsibility. They don't understand that somebody's got to do it, and it's going to be on the county because it's a county road. So something's got to be done to
That's
fix
why
that.
I made the analogy, what if they were to divert traffic down East Virginia over to Cooper?
Yeah.
I mean, it's the same thing.
Yeah, it is.
And they just don't care.
Except
So-
East Virginia is at least, you can actually have two cars
Yeah,
passing each
yeah,
other
yeah,
in
it is,
Virginia. I'm
it
not
is,
so
yeah, but I
sure
mean-
about the other one.
But I mean,
That's
at
a good
least,
point.
they're just
I know.
diverting traffic.
I know.
It is a valid point, and I think I'm not done complaining about it, and they're probably really sick of me. I just got an email yesterday from Zachary, who is the project manager for that project, and he's looking into the reasons why they allegedly cannot put a traffic signal there, rather than
Well, and
closing it off.
If they were to, I don't mean to belabor this, but if they were to listen to us, we're not talking about signalizing northbound traffic. It's only signalizing, the northbound traffic that would get signalized is turning left off of 41, which it would be just signalizing the southbound traffic. And it would, and the Diplomat Parkway solution that they have is so nice and it's so perfect for this. But and I think, was it you had said they acted like they didn't know where this was?
Yes.
And it's like, and they're the ones who created it.
Yeah. Yeah, I've gotten that comment several times. Well, I'm not familiar with that intersection. Okay. Well, anyway, so that's a different discussion for another day. Yeah. So, okay, does everybody concur with the proposed list of initiatives for the legislative agenda?
Or any derivative thereof. This was,
Yeah.
things that staff discussed, it would be
Okay.
beneficial to us.
Well, I think that it helps them show that we have a variety of issues that we are coming to, could use some assistance on.
That's
We
true.
can certainly establish priorities, but
Yeah. And some of these projects may not require nearly as much money as an ask. Okay. All right. Well, then we'll finalize the list for the next meeting then.
Under water quality, do you want to leave both, or do you want septic to sewer to be a discussion item that's not a request at this point?
I think we're still in the discussion phase personally. I don't know how everybody else feels, but I think it's too soon to be asking for money for it until we know exactly what we're dealing with here. Anybody disagree with that?
Only thing is that being that there is ARPA funds, it probably better, truly, we can maybe even look at Arcadia and see what their ask is and just do something. But I think better to carve out some money because it won't be here next year. This is a one-time.
Nancy?
is this money, are we able to accumulate this or do we have to use it?
Usually you have to
I mean,
use
I
it
know
within a
that-
period of time.
In the past, it's been, use it in this particular year, but,
Right.
with these septic to sewer projects being so big, we need a lot of money. They may not have a lot, so it might take multiple years to,
Can the money that we ask for be used for the early stuff, the preliminary designing and?
We have to put in a main line, right? And there's some,
We'll have to design a whole system.
Okay, so could we break it down so that we'd be asking for money for?
That still means you're gonna have to finish the project and
Well,
we're not
yeah.
to that stage yet.
yeah, that's my concern is, I'm not sure we're at that point yet.
And I mean, you don't want to do that, but.
We also have a new council being seated in 2 weeks, and they may have a different opinion about what needs to be done. So respectfully, I have to take that into consideration. And I think that's important as well. But
The money's there, I think.
Yeah, but this is one and done.
Yeah.
There's COVID one, and
Well,
so
then,
this is COVID
then maybe
money.
we ask for a certain amount of money for design and engineering.
That's
So-
what I
Because
was
we're
asking.
gonna have to do that anyway. If we do or don't move forward, we have to know exactly what we're dealing with and
Yeah,
we may be able to use those
design
funds.
a whole system before we ever
Yeah.
get into the construction dollars.
Okay. All right, well then let's go with that.
And
Okay.
we'll keep the rest on there, put some meat on the bones for that.
And then we can always go back in later years and ask for more funds for the actual construction part of it if we have to. Okay. In the meantime, Kristen can explore grant funding and other things. Okay, next we have the city manager's evaluation. Mr. Payne.
And I guess I could lead this off somewhat also. Just to say, it's been a pleasure taking this first year to really get to know the city of Punta Gorda much better and some of the nuances of where we are and where we needed to be. And the input that council was provided that helped me do that has been invaluable and will continue to be. So I certainly appreciate the evaluations you provided and the feedback and comments that helps me continue to improve on how we do things and continue to move the city forward. So thank you for that.
All right. Jeff Payne, HR Manager. So what we're looking at here is a spreadsheet of the scores that each council person gave Mr. Murray on his first year in the position, which began on August the 24th, 2020. So one of the issue before you today is going to be to decide, he's eligible for up to 4% increase, and then his date is 8/24. So do you want to give, what percent do you want to give him, and do you want to backdate it to 8/24? Okay. So he was graded on leadership, service delivery management, interactions with others, organization and planning, judgment and decision-making, the ability to communicate, integrity, and then there was a list of 5 performance objectives, which if you want me to go through, I do have those.
No, not necessary.
Okay.
We read them.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't think we have pretty much consensus.
So the scores are pretty good.
Yeah.
Any comments that you guys would like to make?
I can honestly say that it has been an honor and a privilege to serve with Mr. Murray this year, and I think it's the best decision we've made since I've been on city council. I've lived here going on 25 years, and I honestly don't know anybody who knows more about the city than Greg does, and he's only lived here a little more than a year. He never ceases to amaze me with his product knowledge, and he lives, eats, breathes, and sleeps City of Punta Gorda 24/7, 365. And it just amazes me. And even my husband, who is a naysayer about a lot of things, you all know my husband, he thinks Greg walks on water. But, I have to listen to that all the time. He says, I don't know where you could have found a better city manager. But honestly, thank you for everything that you have done for the city so far. And I look forward to many more years with you at the helm. And it certainly gives me a good feeling of confidence that when we close the doors of business every day, that business hasn't stopped operating, that you're continuing to do the job all the time, every day. And we appreciate that very much.
Well, thank you for the comments. You're overly kind, but it's certainly a beautiful city to be able to work in.
Respect is given when respect is owed.
Well, thank you.
Anybody else have any comments? Nancy?
I know that we have been very blessed to had someone of the caliber of Greg apply to come here that brought with him the background, extensive background that he did from working in county government and with many municipalities. And that's been a tremendous advantage to us as well, because at the county level, you had responsibility for so many different areas that has helped you kind of hit the ground running here. And I know that how much fear and intrepidation there was on the part of city staff as to who's gonna come behind Howard.
Mm-hmm.
Because Howard had been here 15 years, and they had a tremendous relationship with Howard, and he had built this empowerment, and really I think that it was like a pretty well-functioning team, and
Did a great job.
and so it's like, the staff, and rightly so, nervous about who is this person, who are we going to hire, what kind of a culture is this person going to bring, and so we were very specific about the culture we were looking for, and the kind of person, and whatever, and Greg brought that, and I think, and then some. And with a great sense of humor. My perception is that staff is tremendously appreciative of having Greg at the helm, and that it's continued that momentum and allowed, and it's really, when you bring in you have a high-performing team, and you bring in a new person, especially in a leadership, you would expect that team to kind of take a step back, but this team didn't take a step back. Mm-hmm. The ball kept rolling and maybe even picked up some momentum. So, Greg, that just speaks volumes to your leadership and what you have been able to contribute in coming here. So it's been a privilege.
Thank you. We have a very good team, and they can slap me around when I need it.
I like that you empower the employees, and I like that, and it
That's what I
makes
was
everybody
gonna
feel
say.
inclusive. John, you had next.
Yes. I think what you both have said so far says it very well. And I could certainly do want to repeat exactly the same thing. I think what you see coming out of it all, though, is that actually the staff has blossomed too.
Yes.
They've gone beyond what they have done before. And that shows to great leadership. So again, I'm very happy to give you the highest accommodation in this review.
Thank you, sir.
Debbie?
Well, you took what I was going to say
Oh,
about
I'm
the
sorry.
staff. That's okay. One of the things that I have really enjoyed while working with Greg is that what used to be wouldn't it be nice, maybe someday, has become, how can we get it done? And then you turn around and it's done. I mean, there have been things that some of us have been complaining about for a long time, like the paint peeling and the parking garage. And gosh, we've got a beautiful parking garage ceiling now. But it just seems like Greg took things that one step further from the wish list to the accomplishment. And that is just phenomenal. And believe me, people see this. I hear all the time from our constituents. You know, they feel like there's a much more can-do attitude when they talk to staff. I deal with a lot of people who deal with staff because of the nonprofits that I serve with. And they all tell me that there's no, I don't know if we can do that or not. It's well, let's see how we can get that done. And that, I think, is telling. And that carries out into the community. That infects everybody. So I thank you, Mr. Murray. You've done a great job.
Thank you for allowing me to.
Anybody else?
I'd like to also commend you, everything everyone said, but also you're such a good researcher. I think that you take the time to really look under the hood, and I think that you've led so really with information. And I think just really thank you so much for all you do.
Thank you. It's the go team, right?
So the next step is, do we give him a raise, or do we kick him to the curb? Or?
I don't think you can give somebody all these perfects and then demote him.
Does still have a job. You raise the bar.
Hi, we got to lower it a little bit.
Yeah.
And I was, anticipating that anything that happens contractually is generally a budgetary item. So, I mean, budget starts October 1st, and that's also when everyone else realizes any type of increases.
So
Well, you didn't officially start your official title until October 1st.
Right,
October 2nd, actually.
I started with the city August 24th and as city manager October 1st.
Right. So from here forward, are we going on a fiscal year date?
Typically, the city does it on anniversary date, which would be his hire date.
Oh,
So
okay.
if you choose to start it on 8/24, it'll be 8/24 every year. If you want to do it on 10/1, it'll be 10/1 every year.
I'm just thinking from a budgetary perspective, it might be easier to work on a fiscal year. I don't know. How does the city feel about that? Does
fine.
anybody have any comments about that?
in all the years I've been on council, we always did it on a fiscal year.
Yeah.
Right, yeah. So that used to be the policy, was everybody would get it on 10/1. That changed a few
Kristen, do you
years
have a
back.
comment on that?
Kristen Simeon, Finance Director. No, I would say fiscal year, but like if you wanted to give them like the difference for this first year for August 24th through October 1, we could do that as well.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Okay. What's your pleasure, folks?
I would be in favor of doing that.
Yes.
I think we start the raise October 24th, and from here on out, it'll be October 1st.
August 24th.
I mean, August, yeah, what did I say, October?
October.
Okay, you understand.
Yes.
I concur.
Okay, so that's a motion, that's official. Okay, so we have a
Well,
motion.
at what raise?
20%. I'm trying, Greg.
I'm good
I think
with
the
We'll never get
maximum
rid
is
of them.
4%.
I know. The
4%.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second to approve a 4% increase for City Manager Murray. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries unanimously, and thank you very much again.
Thank you. Thank you
All
for the
right.
comments and the opportunity.
All right, city clerk.
Is it morning or afternoon? It's noon.
It's a little of both at the moment.
Okay, starting with vacancies, I'm just going to run through this list real quick. Board of Zoning Appeals, we have 2 regular and 2 alternates. Code Enforcement Board, we have 2 alternates. Firefighters Pension Board, we have 1. Historic Preservation Advisory Board, we have 2. Planning Commission, we have 1. Punta Gorda Isles Canal Advisory Committee, we have 1. Under nominations, then, we have 1 eligible applicant. That was Mr. Sherman Johnson, who introduced himself to you this morning. If you'd like to nominate and appoint him to the Planning Commission, you may do so by motion.
I move that we nominate and appoint.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to nominate and appoint Mr. Sherman Johnson to the Planning Commission. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you. That's
Thank
all I
you.
have.
Okay. City manager.
Actually, I think we're talked out for the day, except that would like to again thank Councilman Miller and Councilwoman or persons, Krafke, for the service they provided. And certainly it's helped my first year be productive with the history that we've known here and the detail that's provided. Every time we have agenda briefings, I learn more. So thank you for your service, and looking forward to working with the new council persons and for, of course, the whole council and what we've been able to accomplish in the past year. And best wishes. You know the phone numbers don't change, so make sure you still stay in touch for anything that you may need. Thank you.
Thank you. City attorney.
Before we move on, can I just clarify that council members Miller and Krafke will be here for the November 3rd meeting?
Yep.
And they will be seated at the dais until the new members are sworn in. And we'll have a little presentation then.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yep.
Cool.
That being said, this is still my last opportunity to address the city council as presently constituted. And I wanted to thank you for your patience and understanding as it relates to the adoption of the new sign code. What gets lost in the debate as to whether or not using the F word on a sign that's visible by children is protected by the First Amendment is that since 2015, when the U.S. Supreme Court adopted its decision in Reed versus City of Gilbert, our previously existing sign code, which was based on content-based categories, was viewed to be unconstitutional because it was an infringement on free speech. In order to be constitutional, the U.S. Supreme Court has said that the ordinances relating to signs needed to be content neutral. And so the code that you adopted, obviously with debate as you went through the process, makes it much greater opportunity for speech to be presented on the signs that are within the city of Punta Gorda, particularly, for example, with respect to political signs. And so rather than repeal the ordinance as was suggested earlier this morning, the ordinance that you adopted greatly expands the rights of free speech within the city of Punta Gorda, and I think you should be commended for that. So thank you. That's all I have.
I was asked a question, as long as we're on this subject. Is there any way to pursue civil action against people who are blatantly opposing the sign ordinance and being continuous disruptions?
Well, all right, so the immediate answer to your question is no. The disruptions that you may be referring to, from what I've heard during our staff meetings, for example, are more in the nature of verbal disruptions, not necessarily with respect to the signs that violated our sign code. To my knowledge, There has been no further violation of the sign codes by the two people who received orders against them by the Code Enforcement Board, which are now on appeal. And so to the extent that there aren't any new violations of the sign code, and that's now in the court with respect to their challenge that our ordinance is unconstitutional, we'll ultimately get a decision by the court with respect to that. A motion to stay enforcement against those two individuals will be presented to the Code Enforcement Board at the next Code Enforcement Board meeting. In view of the fact that it's now really in the courts, we'll be recommending to the Code Enforcement Board to grant the stay as it relates to those existing violations. And there's two new violations that were made prior to the notice of appeal being filed, which we're going to continue until after a decision is rendered by the courts. That saves the city additional legal fees and what have you. Certainly the city will enforce any new violation by those gentlemen or anyone else, which is a violation of the sign code, which in fact remains lawful until a court of competent jurisdiction decides otherwise. So I've talked briefly to the police department about the opportunity to deal with disruptions, public disturbances, for example, which are unrelated to the sign code. And so if there's a need to be more aggressive with respect to the enforcement of disturbing the peace, that can still be done. And again, that's not related to the sign code, that's related to verbal expression, which our ordinance does not address.
I ask that for a number of reasons. There is one group that has a church service in Gilchrist Park every Sunday, and the church service has been disrupted, blatantly disrupted, on a couple of occasions. I understand that police would have to be called and they have to witness it firsthand before they can do anything about it. That's one instance. We had the instance at the school where the signage was outside the school entrance, and we also had one over the weekend for an hour on one side of the bridge, an hour on the other side of the bridge, with a fetus picture. And I'm sorry, I just think that we're breaching the acceptability threshold.
Well, as the city attorney, I can only advise that there is a fair amount of free speech that is in fact protected by the U.S. Constitution. I've simply advised the city council that with respect to obscenity as we've defined it, which is based on case law, fighting words as we've defined it as based on case law, and indecent speech as we've defined it, those are the areas that I think we are comfortable in regulating, because the courts have said those three categories, although it may be content-based, are clearly not protected by First Amendment rights. Other things that we might find distasteful, however, are protected.
Okay.
Now, there may be, one of the things we were talking about is regardless of what's being said, if someone's on a bullhorn that's turned up, say that 6 blocks away, it's waking people up, and I'm being very facetious, but does that disturb the peace in some manner, regardless of what's being said, aside from the discussion of the content of what's being said? Is there something that's too loud that we can try to prevent if that occurs? And that's a whole different discussion, I believe, than this.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, under council member comments, I have a few things. Just want to remind everybody that the homecoming parade is next Thursday, the 28th at 6 p.m. It's a step off. This year, they're going from the school to downtown, which is reverse of what it normally is. So we'll be meeting over at the CPAC parking lot, and the kickoff is 6 p.m. And Fire Chief Briggs is bringing his antique fire truck. And then we'll have the Veterans Parade on November 6th at 10 a.m. with the same route. We also have the Halloween festivities coming up in City Hall parking garage, and anybody who is so inclined, we'd love to have you participate. They can always use help. We will have different eras of time being represented in the displays that they're making, and we have classic cars from each of those eras being brought in from local car club people that are helping out with the project. So I hope you guys can participate, and we're still looking for candy donations from anybody who's willing to donate candy for the cause. We have a lot of kids we give candy to that night, so I hope you can all do that. The Chamber has asked me to announce that on October 27th, from 3 to 6 p.m., they are having another job fair at the Event Center, and the city has not yet signed up for it. They were in it the last time, and I guess it got some new employees out of it, so they asked me to mention that. I've already mentioned the legislative delegation meeting is at the Military Heritage Museum, and I mentioned earlier that at the MPO meeting, we discussed possibly lowering the speed limit on Nesbit. That's something that I would like to ask we put on a future council agenda to talk about further. I also wanted to just give you another update from the MPO board meeting, and that is that Burnt Store Road, the widening of Burnt Store Road in Phase 2, which is from Notre Dame to north of Zemmel Road, is scheduled for completion by November 22nd. That just came out this week, so I wanted to share that with everybody. And since the legislative delegation is getting ready to go into session fairly soon, one of the things we talked about last year was to tie in with Lee County and also Sarasota-Manatee County MPO boards and ask for a Purple Heart Highway designation through our corridor. And so I spoke to Ben Albritton, Senator Albritton, last year about it, and we were too late to get it on the agenda, but I'm going to send a letter to him to remind him, and just wanted to let you guys know I was going to do that before I do it. But I want to just let him know that we still want to have that happen. That's an MPO initiative that I just want to follow through with what we started last year. So I'll be doing that. City manager and I are having a meeting tomorrow morning with the folks from the Meridian Assisted Living Project. We've had a couple of letters from residents about some issues going on with the construction site, so we're going to meet with them to see if we can hash those out. They're using Socorro as a delivery site location, and they're not supposed to be doing that. So that's one of the things, and we're talking about the privacy fence. So there's that. And then finally, FP&L's gone dark on us, no pun intended. But they've gone dark on us, and they're not responding to any of my emails or Greg's emails. So it's time that I think we need to let them know that the PUC is going to be brought in if we don't start getting some activity happening, because there's over 130 poles that are double poles still sitting out there, and I am routinely getting emails from residents complaining about them. I know you guys are getting copied on a lot of those, so I think it's time to take some action on it. I have to say Comcast did a 180, and they respond to every email I send, even if it's just to acknowledge they got the email. So Comcast is fine. It's just that we're having a real problem with FP&L. So I just want to let you know we may have to do some action on that. And that's all I have. Jaha.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure serving with you. Such a pleasure serving with you. It's been really a blessing.
Thank you, thank you.
That's basically it.
Yeah, it's been a great 8 years, and we'll have more to talk about in 2 weeks.
I was saving my comments for that.
Yeah. Exactly. But I would say go for it with the Public Utilities Commission. I really, I have personal experience with that, as I've said before. They do not like that.
No, they don't. And when we talked about it the last time, I had an email and a phone message by the time I got home from the council meeting that day, so. Debbie?
I have nothing.
Oh, you're awfully quiet today. John?
Is she okay?
No. She's actually not okay. She's in a lot of pain.
Could we just get the meeting over?
Well, I'll hold remarks till next meeting, I guess.
Okay.
Yeah, because
Very-
otherwise we'll cry.
I know. Very good
Yeah, I'm
meeting
gonna
today.
probably
We
have
covered a
tears.
lot of stuff today, and I think it went very smoothly.
Good, okay. All right, there being no further business, we are adjourned.
Shooting for 12.